day of highs and lows for protesters in Lebanon. Celebrations broke out as Prime Minister Hariri announced his resignation, but earlier protest sites were attacked, with demonstrators blaming supporters of Shiite politicians. Iraq's rival political parties agree to work together to oust the country's prime minister. It comes after over a dozen anti-government protesters were gunned down by masked attackers. And trading in a Halloween Brexit for a Christmas ballot. British MPs vote to hold an early election on December 12th, their third trip to the polls in just 5 years. Welcome back to the France 24 newsroom here in Paris. I'm Allison Sargent. Thank you for joining us. Anti-government protesters in Lebanon scored a victory this Tuesday after nearly 2 weeks of demonstrations. Prime Minister Saad Hariri announced his resignation. But President Michel Aoun hasn't formally accepted that resignation yet. And even if he does, Hariri would remain in office until a new government could be formed. Hariri said he wanted to give the country a, quote, positive shock to break the deadlock, but some fear his resignation could lead to even greater instability. France's foreign minister was among those expressing his concerns and offering support.
Are the political authorities, the Lebanese political leaders, ready to work for Lebanon together? Should the collective interest of the country come before their own personal interests? That is the question raised by the decision of Prime Minister Hariri to resign. Lebanon needs a commitment from all the political leaders to question themselves and provide a strong answer to the population. Reforms, and France is determined to help them in this way.
Well, just ahead of Hariri's resignation, the protests saw violence for the first time when supporters of Hezbollah and another Shiite group attacked protest sites in Beirut. Julia Seeger has more on today's developments.
Waving the Lebanese flag and chanting in joy in the streets of Beirut. After 13 days of protests, demonstrators seem to have won the battle. Bowing to pressure from the street, Lebanon's prime minister finally announced he was stepping down.
I put my resignation in the hands of the president and all the Lebanese people. Positions come and go, but what's important is the dignity and security of the country.
For nearly 2 weeks, Lebanon has been gripped by unprecedented nationwide protests. Lebanese from all walks of life took to the streets of several cities across the country night and day to ask for the government to step down, accusing the ruling elite of corruption and economic mismanagement. Barricades and roadblocks were set up with protesters organizing sit-ins and human chains. A peaceful strategy aimed at paralyzing the country that finally paid. But while protests have remained relatively peaceful, some experts now worry about the political stability of the country in the wake of the government's resignation. In the lead-up to the announcement, a mob loyal to Shiite groups Hezbollah and Amal destroyed a protest camp in central Beirut. This came after Hezbollah leader Sayed Hassan Nasrallah criticized protesters last week.
I think that after the play that took place today, it's clear that the government wants to end this demonstration, even if by force or repression, even if the voice of the people was louder than theirs.
Another cause for concern, the economic stability of Lebanon. The country, which has been on lockdown for 13 days, is said to be on the brink of economic collapse.
Moving over to Iraq, where state media reports that the country's two largest political parties have agreed to work together to meet the demands of protesters. State media reports that the populist Shiite cleric, who is the leader of parliament's largest bloc, asked the leader of the second largest bloc to help him introduce a vote of no confidence against the Iraqi prime minister. Their alliance comes after the country's already violent protests saw even more bloodshed when a group of masked gunmen opened fire on protesters, killing 18 people and wounding hundreds of others. Andrew Hillier has more.
Out in force despite a violent police crackdown that has left so many of them dead. In Baghdad's Tahrir Square, what has become the protest's symbolic heart was packed with Iraqis determined to bring down the government.
We're staying put in Tahrir Square until the corrupt government goes. Their time is up. We're sick and tired of them.
Amidst thick clouds of tear gas, these protesters have defied a curfew imposed by the authorities. Every day they grow in number, using sit-ins and strike action to heap pressure on the country's leaders. Further south, in the holy city of Najaf, protesters saw their demands championed by Muqtada al-Sadr, one of Iraq's most influential Shiite clerics, seen here at the wheel of his car. He invited his political rival Hadi al-Amiri, who leads the second largest bloc in parliament, to work towards triggering snap elections. Pressure is growing on Iraq's leaders to find a political solution that will stem the violence. In the Shiite holy city of Karbala, 18 people were reportedly killed on Monday night, but officials say they are not responsible for the spiraling death toll.
We arrested violent people. They were captured by video surveillance cameras setting objects on fire. There were even some protesters wearing military clothing and carrying clubs.
Live from Paris on France 24.
That many of his critics did not think that he could do, and that is he did get the EU to reopen the withdrawal agreement. They had said repeatedly they would not do that since they had struck a deal after 2 years of negotiations with the previous Prime Minister, Theresa May. But the problem was that 3 times of asking this year, in January and in the spring, she got turned down comprehensively by MPs. So she was replaced at the end of July, as we know, by the current Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And he's been trying to call a general election because he lost the small majority he inherited from her. And finally today, the impasse, the deadlock, the cul-de-sac in a sense, and the paralysis certainly that has really been very, very present in this Prime Ministership under Boris Johnson, that deadlock's been broken. So 438 votes in favour, only 20 voted against of this early general election. So ignition has started. We just need one more bit on that rocket, and that is the upper chamber, the House of Lords, to give its approval. We expect it to do that probably tomorrow. And I can tell you the election campaign's already started, because I just got an email from Jeremy Corbyn and also a tweet from Boris Johnson. So they are campaigning already here. Today, it was interesting to hear the word refresh Parliament. That's quite a mild word, but he's really accused this Parliament of not wanting to deliver Brexit, of standing in the way of delivering Brexit, not respecting the vote of the referendum back in 2016. And of course, his pledge, do or die, no ifs or buts. I would rather die in a ditch than ask for an extension. But he did, because of a law being passed and very much control of Parliament being seized by the opposition. He did ask for that extension. It's been granted. The deadline is no longer the 31st of October. So on Thursday, it is now going to be the 31st of January 2020. Of course, if the UK wants to leave before that, it can do so. But there is a deal on the table. There is an extension. And the worry of the opposition parties was that a no deal might still be on the cards.
Benedict Pavio reporting from London there. Protests against inequality continue in Chile, with thousands rallying in the capital this Tuesday. It's the 12th day of the demonstrations that began as a protest against a now canceled hike in subway ticket prices. The mobilization continues despite concessions offered by President Piñera, including small increases in minimum wage and pensions and higher taxes on the wealthy. Protesters, though, remain unsatisfied. They are calling for changes to Chile's constitution, which they say provides the legal basis for the country's market-driven system. Lawmakers in the United States voted overwhelmingly this Tuesday to recognize the Armenian genocide. The House of Representatives voted 405 to 11 in favor of a resolution. It says that the U.S. will commemorate as genocide the killing of 1.5 million Armenians by the Ottoman Empire between 1915 and 1923. Turkey was quick to condemn the vote, calling it a meaningless political step that is, quote, devoid of any historical or legal basis. Staying in the U.S., where the impeachment inquiry against President Trump saw a major development this Tuesday. For the first time, investigators heard testimony from an official who actually listened in on the phone call between the U.S. president and his Ukrainian counterpart. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman testified that he was concerned by that call and did not think it proper to demand that a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen. Well, earlier we spoke to American legal expert Eric Lazan. He told us just how damaging he thinks Vindman's testimony will prove to be.
The evidence right now seems overwhelming, and indeed Nancy Pelosi today elaborated on her statement yesterday, she being the Speaker of the House of Representatives that is conducting the inquiry, that there will be formal procedures established by vote, affirming this impeachment investigation and laying out the exact requirements and procedures to make it more transparent as possible. It will be the most transparent and open impeachment really in U.S. history. There have only been two others, but compared to the others, this will be much more open and transparent, and perhaps setting a timeline for moving this along, even though they are in the middle of extensive witness inquiries, and in all the investigative stages are still going on right now. There's a tremendous amount of presidential activity that still needs to be investigated.
On the other side of the United States, in California, firefighters are battling blazes in both the north and south of the state. The mayor of Los Angeles says that the so-called Getty fire, which is burning west of downtown, has now been 15% contained. Since Monday, it has burned at least a dozen homes and led to the evacuation of over 7,000 people. Making matters worse, California is expecting strong overnight winds across the state, which authorities worry could help fan the flames and start new fires. We're going to have to leave it there for this edition, but stay with us here on France 24. We'll have more news coming up for you in just a bit.
En France 24 nos esforzamos por brindar la mejor información hecha por periodistas de Latinoamérica y del resto del mundo.
We look at how technology is shaping the future, and we show you the latest gadgets you can soon get your hands on.
نقدم لكم الاقتصاد بطريقة مختلفة، نبسط المفاهيم والمصطلحات كي تكتمل الصورة لديكم.
Aquí puedo hablar de medio ambiente, no solo de los problemas que afectan a nuestro planeta, sino también de iniciativas y soluciones que a veces no tienen espacio en televisión.
La différence sur France 24, c'est l'idée du reportage. Nos grands reportages, vous ne les verrez nulle part ailleurs.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
It's time now to turn around to business, and who better than Brian Quinn here in the studio. Good evening, sir.
Thank you,
starting with the CEO of Boeing, spending Tuesday in the hot seat as he testified before US lawmakers about company failures that led to 2 deadly airline crashes. Brian.
Well, Mark, Tuesday marks 1 year since the first of those 2 crashes, blamed on faulty flight control software installed in Boeing's 737 MAX series jets. Together, those 2 crashes killed 346 people. 7 months after the second incident, the 737 MAX remains grounded worldwide, costing Boeing and the airlines that use it billions of dollars. Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg faced tough questions from U.S. senators, admitting for the first time that the company made mistakes in the design of the MAX. Boeing and U.S. aviation regulators both have faced accusations of lax oversight amid the company's rush to get the MAX to market as rival Airbus released new planes. As spectators in the audience held up photos of their lost loved ones, Muhlenberg apologized to families. Here he is.
On behalf of myself and the Boeing Company, we are sorry, deeply and truly sorry. As a husband and father myself, I'm heartbroken by your losses. And every day, that drives us to improve the safety of our airplanes and our industry. And that will never stop.
Checking in on the markets now. European indexes mixed on Tuesday. London's FTSE 100 closed down 0.33%. CAC 40 here in Paris eked out some minor gains by the closing bell. Frankfurt DAX ended the day just under the flat line. Overall on Wall Street, indexes lost some ground as investors wait for an expected interest rate cut from the Federal Reserve. Dow and the S&P 500 both closing down slightly, despite a new record high on the S&P earlier today. Shares in Google parent Alphabet lost over 2% as earnings missed expectations. The Nasdaq ended the day in the red by over 0.5%. Next, Saudi Arabia's Future Investment Initiative is currently underway in Riyadh. The yearly conference, nicknamed Davos in the Desert, is once again drawing high-profile business and political leaders. Last year saw many of them skip the event following the murder of dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi by a team of Saudi agents. James Vazina has the details.
It's the Saudi Kingdom's third annual investment forum and a much busier edition than the last. As the summit kicks off this Tuesday, the governor of the kingdom's wealth fund boasts a boost in attendance at the three-day event nicknamed Davos in the Desert.
In 2017, the participants were mainly coming from the Americas, Europe, and the Middle East. Today and now, you are coming from China, India, Japan, Russia, Africa, the Americas, Europe, and the Middle East.
But the governor makes no mention of last year's attendance. That's because many would-be investors pulled out of the summit after the murder of veteran journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the kingdom's embassy in Istanbul. But a year on, many of those who boycotted the 2018 edition are back, and a strong turnout could help to revamp the Crown Prince's image, despite the CIA's ruling that Mohammed bin Salman was responsible for the killing. And the talk on everyone's lips is the planned IPO for state oil giant Aramco. Considered to be the world's most profitable company, Aramco claims to have earned almost $70 billion so far this year, and Saudi Arabia is planning to offer a stake of up to 5% to international investors. Mohammed bin Salman is calling for the firm to be valued at $2 trillion, but company executives are instead putting the value closer to $1.5 trillion.
Time now for a look at some more of the day's top business headlines. Fiat Chrysler is reportedly in merger talks with French auto giant PSA Peugeot Citroën. The Wall Street Journal reporting the possibility of an all-stock deal that could see the two firms combine as equals. Those talks come just months after a failed merger deal between Fiat Chrysler and PSA's French rival Renault. Airbus has confirmed a huge sale to Indigo Airlines. Indian budget carriers placed an order for 300 jets from Airbus's A320 line. The deal worth around 33 billion euros, though large discounts are usually negotiated in such cases. And the Pentagon has announced a deal with Lockheed Martin that will lower the price of new F-35 Joint Strike Fighters by over 12%. The $34 billion deal includes the delivery of 478 F-35s, reducing the price per jet to just $78 million. Price tag Washington hopes will encourage allies to buy into the Defense Department's most costly weapon system ever. Can't afford health insurance, though. Finally, for business, shares in plant-based protein company Beyond Meat just got sent through the meat grinder. Despite the company announcing its first ever quarterly profit of over $4 million, shares had over 22% of their value sliced off Tuesday as a ban on share sales finally expired following the company's IPO. While the stock is down from its record high in July, it's still trading over 3 times its initial price. It's because meat alternatives turning out to be very good business. According to Nielsen, sales were up over 9% in the year to the end of August. And Mark, I haven't had the Beyond Burger yet, but I had the Impossible Burger in the States. Surprising, really astonishing, honestly. Tastes just like a burger.
And that'll be the subject of Brian's latest blog, of course, published on his website. Thank you very much indeed, sir. No mouth-watering business there from Brian Quinn. Great stuff. Thanks. Time for sport now. Selena Sykes joins us. I'm smiling because I'm an Everton fan and it's a rare thing we've won tonight. But you're starting with tennis and an upset at the women's WTA finals. Take it away, Selena.
Indeed, so there was a bit of an upset, a bit of a last-minute drama as well, and a shock defeat for world number one Ashley Barty. The Australian was stunned by Dutch player Kiki Bertens, who was added to the tournament just hours before the clash to replace Naomi Osaka, who pulled out with a shoulder injury. Burton struggled early on, trailing by a set and a break, but pulled off a resounding comeback with Ruthless returning to overwhelm Barty in the second and third sets. The Australian failed to recover after losing 7 games in a row in the second set. Burton's won 3-6, 6-3, 6-4 in 2 hours and 9 minutes. Staying with tennis and the latest from day 2 at the Paris Masters. Defending champion Karen Khachanov has been knocked out by Jan-Leonard Struff. Struff managed to edge forward in a tight first set that lasted 46 minutes. The pair were going level into the third set after Khachanov fought back to win the second. The German, though, broke Khachanov in the 4th game of the final set for the first time in the match, winning 7-6, 3-6, 7-5. Khachanov's early exit dashes his hopes for qualifying for next month's ATP finals in London. And Alex de Minaur has booked his place in the second round in the French capital after beating Laszlo de Geer in straight sets. The Australian lost his serve in the opening game, but came back to break the Serbian to take the first set in 33 minutes. The 20-year-old recovered again after losing his serve at the start of the second set to win 6-1, 6-4 in just over an hour. De Minaur was competing just days after losing against Roger Federer in the Swiss indoors final. To football now, and a quick run-through of tonight's Carabao Cup results. Leicester booked their place in the quarter-finals with a 3-1 victory against League One side Burton. 2 second-half goals for Everton saw off Watford at Goodison Park, and holders Manchester City eased through with 2 goals from Sergio Aguero, contributing to their 3-1 victory against Southampton. The Saints there still rather sore after their 9-0 loss against Leicester at the weekend. And in the German Cup, 2 late goals stopped division side VfL Bochum from pulling off one of the greatest upsets in the competition so far against Bayern Munich. The Bundesliga champions trailed for most of the game with after an own goal, but Bayern Munich made a late comeback, equalising in the 83rd minute after Serge Gnabry found the back of the net. Bochum then went down to 10 men in the 89th minute, before Thomas Müller scored a second for Bayern there to stop the game from going to extra time. Bulgaria have been slapped with a stadium ban for their fans' racist abuse of England players in a Euro 2020 qualifier. UEFA ordered Bulgaria to play their next competitive game behind closed doors for Nazi salutes and monkey chants by supporters during their team's 6-0 loss against the World Cup semi-finalists. The game was stopped twice and could have been abandoned, but England decided
Excel get greener, and we're moving.
The Federation has also been fined €75,000 by UEFA. The ban will see final Euro 2020 qualifying game against the Czech Republic in an empty ground, which will cost its federation an estimated €100,000 in lost revenue. A second match ban has been suspended for 2 years. And finally, a new era has begun for the United States women's team after they named a new head coach. Vlatko Andoniski has taken over from Jill Ellis, who has won back-to-back World Cups with Team USA. The 43-year-old, who was born in North Macedonia, has been in charge of Reign FC in the National Women's Soccer League for the past 2 seasons, where star striker Megan Rapinoe plays her club football. Andonovski said his priority is getting to the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. The US's qualifying campaign starts at the end of January. He said being appointed as coach was a huge honour. He'll be leading his side for the first time in a friendly against Sweden in November.
I think it's very important to know that the players are excited just as well as me. Okay, like I said before, they're some of the best players in the world, and to know that some of the best players in the world value the knowledge, the understanding, and the job that I do, it's extremely important for me. And I mean, I'm just humbled by some of their comments.
So, Mark, obviously big shoes to fill there and a lot of expectations, obviously, with Team USA.
The US women's team are fantastic. That controversy about the celebrations is one thing, but on the pitch, they play great football. It's as simple as that. Selena, thank you very much indeed, and thanks for just reinforcing that Everton won for a change. There we go. Thank you very much indeed.
These men are preparing their £10 worth of cocaine for injection. It's a quick and cheap high, and just one of multiple substances that they take. But they're just the most visible example of a worsening drug crisis in Glasgow and across Scotland, which now has one of the highest rates of drug-related deaths in Europe. Local social workers say that not enough is being done to tackle the scourge.
There has to be a shift if we want to take it serious, that this is a health issue which we should be embarrassed about as a nation, you know, and we need to act on it.
Many drug users in Glasgow, like those in this rehabilitation centre, have been using for decades. Long-term addicts' age and years of abuse are contributing to the rocketing rate of drug deaths, with 42 the average age of such victims last year.
And I'm at that age, and I know I've got another bender in me, I've not got another relapse in me, I'll die if I go out there and I'm not ready now. I've had a few friends die in the last 6 months, no heroin users at all, but take Valium to get asleep after being up a couple of nights in cocaine and a street Valium, and I've not woke up.
The local government say it hasn't really evolved in almost 30 years. Anne-Marie, herself a former addict, says it will take a drastic approach to tackle such an endemic problem.
So obviously there are deep-rooted social problems, poverty, inequality, oppression, and historical and political problems that feed into that need for oblivion. But I think the normalisation of addiction passing as culture in Scotland has a lot to do with the state we see ourselves in now.
Official statistics for last year show a record 1,187 fatalities in Scotland, with many predicting that this year's figures will be even higher. And in neighbouring England,
aimed at paralyzing the country that finally paid. But while protests have remained relatively peaceful, some experts now worry about the political stability of the country in the wake of the government's resignation. In the lead up to the announcement, a mob loyal to Shiite groups Hezbollah and Amal destroyed a protest camp in central Beirut. This came after Hezbollah leader Sayed Hassan Nasrallah criticized protesters last week.
I think that after the play that took place today, it's clear that the government wants to end this demonstration, even if by force or repression, even if the voice of the people was louder than theirs.
Another cause for concern, the economic stability of Lebanon. The country, which has been on lockdown for 13 days, is said to be on
Hadi Al-Amiri, who leads the second largest bloc in parliament, to work towards triggering snap elections. Pressure is growing on Iraq's leaders to find a political solution that will stem the violence. In the Shiite holy city of Karbala, 18 people were reportedly killed on Monday night, but officials say they are not responsible for the spiraling death toll.
We arrested violent people. They were captured by video surveillance cameras setting objects on fire. There were even some protesters wearing military clothing and carrying clubs.
That flies in the face of the conclusion of an inquiry carried out by the government itself, in which it slams the police for using heavy-handed measures. At least 240 people have already lost their lives since the unrest began at the start of the month.
The armies of Turkey and Syria exchanged deadly fire along their border late Tuesday. It's the first time the two countries have clashed since Ankara launched their anti-Kurdish offensive in northern Syria earlier this month. The violence complicates the situation on the ground, which was otherwise calm. Earlier Tuesday, the Turkish president confirmed that Kurdish forces successfully made the deadline to withdraw from a designated border zone. Turkish and Russian forces are now set to begin joint patrols to verify the Kurdish withdrawal. It's not the gift many in the UK wanted for the holidays, but the country is heading for yet another general election this December. MPs voted in favor of holding an early election after deadlock over Brexit led to the EU extending the deadline until January 31st. The legislation now goes for a vote in the House of Lords. Our correspondent, Benedict Pavio, has more from London.
What must not be forgotten in the context is that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, did something that many of his critics did not think that he could do, and that is he did get the EU to reopen the withdrawal agreement. They had said repeatedly they would not do that since they had struck a deal after 2 years of negotiations with the previous Prime Minister, Theresa May. But the problem was, but 3 times of asking this year, in January and in the spring, she got turned down comprehensively by MPs. So she was replaced at the end of July, as we know, by the current Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. And he's been trying to call a general election because he lost the small majority he inherited from her. And finally today, the impasse, the deadlock, the cul-de-sac in a sense, and the paralysis certainly that has
despite concessions offered by President Piñera, including small increases in minimum wage and pensions and higher taxes on the wealthy. Protesters
Oh, wait. I have one other thing.
Just one more
I do have 7 postcards to give to my fellow council members who are here. They were printed in 1993. I got them when I first came on council in 1995. They're 19-cent postcards. And back then, we hardly had email. So I'm giving each one of my fellow council members a postcard to remember me by and maybe send me a note. And then we need the other 14. And then I have, because I got to serve on the Denver, what is it called? Denver Water Flood Control, Urban Drainage and Flood Control, that has a new name. And I'm going to turn this over to Sam, Returning the Platte River to the People. And that's by Joe Shoemaker, who was the founder of the Urban Drainage and Flood Control. So, anyway.
All right. It's up to you.
Picture?
You doing a picture?
Last picture. Sure.
All right, look. Who's doing it? She's like, who's taking it?
Please take it.
Oh, my flowers.
Somebody have a camera?
Elise does. Everybody has it.
I know.
Can you put that on my? I would have worn brown pants.
Lisa. Going off in the middle? Yeah. All right.
Push together. Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Let's do it 2 more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
All right. Awesome.
Okay, now down to some business. Because this is a special council meeting, we don't have public comment. We're only going to have, we have a very long consent agenda that is going to take a little discussion, but then we'll have one public hearing, and that's on our Police Oversight Task Force ordinance. So if you want to speak to that, please sign up over there. And with that,
your consent agenda tonight contains items A through O.
So a couple of these are meaty and deserve a little bit of discussion. Not sure where we want to start. Lisa, you had...
Yeah, I called it 3E, but I meant it's 3D. It was called 3E in our packet, but it's 3D. And this has to do with appointing...
It's 2D.
2D, sorry.
You're going to catch on to this soon.
And so I had a email discussion. I sent out an email earlier this morning asking that we consider hiring the Fort Collins attorney, given that for this investigation, given that that individual is outside of Boulder, has nothing to do with Boulder County, and that on this particular issue, people are pretty divided, and that I'm not questioning anybody's ethics or their integrity, but I want to make sure that this investigation is as squeaky clean as possible, and that at the end of this investigation, there is no doubt left in terms of the results of that investigation. So I have asked that our city attorney contact the city of Fort Collins city attorney's office and see if we could have an attorney from their office represent this investigation.
So let me turn to Tom Carr.
I have reached out to the Fort Collins city attorney. I have not heard back. So your options are either appoint, as I've suggested, or we'll bring it back after I've spoken with the Fort Collins city attorney. So this request came in today.
Can we approve it upon that condition?
I would be reluctant to appoint someone who has not consented to the appointment or has even knows about it. That seems a bit much.
I think what we're saying is, Tom, can we delegate to the authority to engage someone from the Fort Collins attorney's office?
Sure.
Does that work as an amended ED 2D?
Can you make it broader? So is someone, an attorney who has not worked in the city of Boulder and is not from Boulder County?
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah. And with whom you don't have didn't used to work for you or something like that?
Yeah.
No one from Seattle.
There's a lot of good attorneys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But starting with Fort Collins, right?
Well, I'll start there, but...
well, you already did, so, okay. Does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll consider that an amended. Okay. Also on this consent agenda is all of our budgets, which we already talked to at length. 2M is our community benefits program, isn't it? Yes. And I just wanted to do a shout out to that. That is to incentivize more affordable housing in exchange for density. And that was a lot of work. 2N is Opportunity Zone. And we've been getting a lot of email about that. And I think we want to clarify for everybody exactly what that is and what it isn't. And I'm going to put Sam on the spot.
Okay, well, when we started the process of looking at the Opportunity Zone, we put a moratorium in, I think, in December of 2018. And the intention of the moratorium had twofold. One was to change and review all of the use tables in the 18 zone districts that are part of the Opportunity Zone and make sure that what we would be getting would be focused on neighborhood serving retail and affordable housing. And so we made those changes. We limited office space and hotels in the Opportunity Zone. And then we further stated, and I made the motion, so I went and reread my motion language. We further stated that we wanted to protect all of the market rate affordable housing, which is present in the Opportunity Zone. And we did that with an overlay district. So we put a district into place which basically prevents demolitions of market rate affordable residential housing. And so I feel like we set out to do this process to make sure that what we get from this tax benefit, this tax credit move on the federal government's part is what we're looking for. So one of the things that was mentioned when Jane put in for this opportunity zone was Diagonal Plaza. So Diagonal Plaza is pretty much, it's owned by 7 different owners. And if this tool can be used to get us good outcomes at Diagonal Plaza, I think we will have done our job. So I guess that's how I would summarize how we got to where we are. The other thing I will say that we did ask staff about when we had second reading on this is we asked staff, could they please let us know if there's any more tools that we have? Can we find out where these funds are being used? Is there a way to legally require disclosure? And the answer we got was no. Furthermore, even if we were able to find out where the funds were being used when they transfer. So it's often the case that land gets bought, a project gets entitled, and it gets sold off at that point. And then finding if people who bought subsequently had OZ funding. Staff just told us it really couldn't be done under the set of laws that we have in place today. So there's a summary. Height? Okay, well, that's Mary's point, really. Yeah, I would give that to Mary.
Okay.
Mary. So one of the things that occurred to me was that, and right towards just before we voted, was that I recalled that we have the height ordinance in place. And so I voted in favor of lifting the moratorium on the hunch that the height ordinance would provide some protections. Over the weekend, I had an exchange with a member of the public over email, and I said I shared this with this person, and they wrote back and said, "Well, then you've done all the studies to show that that is in fact true." And so I thought to myself, "Yeah, they're right." So I proceeded to write to staff and ask some questions, and I want to ask them again, and I want to ask them publicly so that you all hear the answers that I have heard, and because I think it's important. So, Chris.
So yeah, Chris Mestruck is going to answer your questions.
Good evening.
Good evening. On the moratorium, assuming that we move forward with the moratorium, what protections do we have in place that would address the concerns that have been expressed to us by the public?
I think there are several protections that you have in place, and the work that is.
Can you introduce yourself again?
Oh, sure. Chris Meschuk, Interim Planning Director, Assistant City Manager. Over the last 10 months, since, as Council Member Weaver described, when the moratorium was put into place in December of 2018, Council, as a part of that moratorium, outlined a series of efforts that we as staff should go through to ensure that if there is any development that occurs in these areas, how do we make sure that that development gets to the outcomes that we want as a community? And we recognize that there were several areas where what our vision, the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, stated for those areas, our code did not necessarily achieve those same outcomes. And so we did a whole bunch of work to the use tables, that's what is up for third reading tonight, to ensure that we're getting the outcomes that we want. So restricting office in certain zone districts is one area, the amount of office that can be built in certain zoning districts. And Councilmember Weaver described some of the others. The other is, as you've said, Mary, the height ordinance. So the Appendix J map that is in the land use code right now limits the areas that you can get a height exception and go up to 55 feet. And that's very limited to areas where we've either done intentional planning or the zone district intends for that level of intensity. And so the height ordinance really is your one of your strongest tools in your toolbox to ensure that you're getting the outcomes that you want. The vast majority of the opportunity zone is not able to go above the base zoning height and get a height exception. So I think that tool is in the toolbox as well. The last that I would say is the decisions that council made related to the commercial linkage fee. The next phase-in of the commercial linkage fee occurs in January, on January 1st. And that's the tipping point that we have heard from many applicants, starts to actually make their projects economically infeasible as well. And so what we're seeing in terms of development trends, anecdotally, I don't have the data yet, we were trying to pull that today, is things are slowing down a little bit as well. And so I think there are several tools in your toolbox using our powers of zoning to ensure that we're getting the outcomes that we want in the area that is located in the opportunity zone.
Thank you for that, Chris. And would you refresh our memory, please, with why we put the height ordinance in place? That's been in for 4 years?
Yeah.
So if you could refresh our memory on that one, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think if we go back to 2015 and remember what was kind of occurring in the community at the time, there was a lot of concern about the types of development and the scale of development that was occurring in certain parts of town, especially in the Boulder Valley Regional Center, the area surrounding 29th Street. And so I think that, along with some of the conversations about projects that are maybe outside of the areas that we would anticipate more intense development or taller buildings, those applications were coming in for height exceptions. And so I think the concern was where exactly should we have taller buildings within the community? And so in reaction to that, the moratorium was put into place that is the height ordinance that we have today and is part of what is still in place with the Appendix J map that we're going to continue to talk about as we work through phase 2 of community benefits.
And as I recall too, the height ordinance was put into place with the understanding that we would work on community benefits. And so we've just gotten through phase 1. And phase 2 has still yet to happen. And that would be, currently is scheduled for, is it June of 2021, May or June?
What's in the ordinance is that the Appendix J map would remain until the end of May of 2021. We anticipate beginning phase 2 as we hit the new year and working through phase 2 through 2020.
And then also, so that date is important because today we received an email that also explained a couple things about the opportunity zone. And one of them had to do with deadlines for investment. And as I understand it, there is one coming up December 31st of this year, and another one coming up December 31st of 2021. Could you just explain a little bit more about that? Because that is something that I just learned about today.
Sure. Yeah, I will. Disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor or a tax attorney, but in working with the, exactly, in working with Yvette Bowden as well as just kind of monitoring the continued regulations of the IRS. There are several deadlines. The key date in the opportunity zone regulations and the legislation is December 31st of 2026. That's a key date that's in the legislation, and you work backwards off of that date. So if you want to receive the maximum IRS benefit from using an opportunity fund, that's 7 years back from December 31st of 2026, which is December 31st of 2019. So if you want to realize the full 7-year benefit of a 15% deferral on your capital gain, you need to make that investment by the end of this year. Then the next deadline is a 5-year increment So that's December of 2021. That would be a 10% deferral on that capital gain. And then after 2026, if you continue to hold that investment for at least 10 years, then you obtain the full benefit. And then there's a period of time that you can continue to hold a piece of property or a business investment that there's some complicated and technical pieces related to one additional benefit that you can receive. But the key date is that 2026 timeline and working back from that.
So that, by pure coincidence, aligns with when we would be hoping to finish the community benefits phase 2, kind of aligns. And then the other thing too was the industrial zones and how that relates to the opportunity zone, and how that, just by its nature of the industrial zones, how those also kind of limit what can happen.
That's correct. In the industrial zones, the floor area ratio in the industrial zones is really low. It's a 0.6. And so as a result of that, you don't see a lot of that really intense development in the industrial zones. And actually what we see on the ground is a lot of times developments in the industrial zones based on other requirements such as open space or parking. They actually hit a limit, and they can't even realize that full 0.6 FAR. So right now, the industrial zones, the way the zoning is written, is it really does lower the development potential in that area. That was a decision that was made as a part of the 1997 rezoning in starting to try and address our jobs housing imbalance. And so I think our industrial zones right now, based on their zoning, don't allow for a significant amount of redevelopment.
Thank you.
So let me, can I just?
Yeah, go ahead.
So let me just sum it up in in a way that I understand it, which is, because I think it's important, because we've heard from a lot of people about opportunity zones, and we think we have done all the work to make sure we get what we need, so that any development would comply with the Boulder Valley Comp Plan that we all worked on together, that height above the base is limited, except for those in Appendix J, which are areas that we already went through area planning for. And the one exception to that is if we're going to get 40% affordable housing, which we have agreed as a community is something we want. So on the off chance somebody wants to give us 40% affordable units, there could be a height exemption. But otherwise, we've pretty much, through the use tables, sort of limited anything that we didn't want to have happen. And that would be why I think at least myself feels fine with lifting the moratorium. Have I got that right?
You have that correct, yeah.
Okay.
I would add that we also put in one of the highest commercial linkage fees in the country. And so that is helping to slow or defer development.
Or get us more housing.
In the opportunity zone. So all of these things, I think, are working together in synergy to make sure that whatever we get is something that we want in terms of the outcome. So we want housing. We don't want so many jobs. We want to get a little more balance between housing and jobs in this community. So I think...
And a reminder about the overlay zone, which is no existing market rate affordable can go away.
Right. I do have a question about the manufactured homes communities in the opportunity zone, and we have two of them, two significant ones. And my concern, if you read about mobile home communities and people wanting to make big investments in these, and that they actually are a big investor item, I am very concerned of what might happen if some investor plans to come in and offer a current owner of a manufactured home community a price that he couldn't say no to, and what that would do to that community. When we put this moratorium in place, we wanted to make sure that no one who is living in the Opportunity Zone was displaced. And I'm equally committed to that for those people living in manufactured housing communities. And my only concern at this point is that we haven't protected those communities as well as we can. Not that they could change from manufactured housing to some other zone or designation, but that somebody might come in and say, hey, this is the next Aspen. We could sell you a really nice manufactured home for $1 million, you know? I mean, that's an exaggeration, but.
Okay, can you answer that?
Could we get some opinion? And I had sent David Gear an email, and I don't see him, so.
Yeah, I think I can start, and then Kurt, if Kurt, you've got anything to follow up on. The first is, and I think you acknowledged it, we have mobile home park zoning, so manufactured home zoning, and that really protects to ensure that mobile home parks are not bought, closed, and residents displaced. The future use of those areas of land are to be for manufactured housing into the future, so I think that's a key protection. And then we've got the other protections that we have for mobile home parks and for their residents in place. And then the last thing is, and again, this is just my understanding of how the Opportunity Zone funding works, is if you use an opportunity fund to invest in a piece of property, you then need to make an improvement to that property, a 50% improvement to the property, and you have to do that within, it's a 30-month period. And so if someone were to buy it, they still have to do a bunch of improvements to the property and achieve that. And so I'm not sure, based on my understanding of, depending on how much they pay for the property, how much the improvements they would need to make, whether a mobile home park would be an investment that someone would make or not. I don't know that for sure. But if you think of what are the improvements in a mobile home park, it's really just the infrastructure that you could make, versus if you bought a building that you're either building a building or you're doing a major renovation to a building, you have a building as the major asset afterwards. So it's a little bit of a different use. And so that would be some thoughts that I have. Kurt, anything to add?
Great, so it seems like a low risk. Okay, so are we done with that one?
Well, I just had one more question.
Oh, wait, and I'm sorry. Aaron.
Oh,
to ask
go
a
ahead.
question, actually. So.
Oh, okay.
It was about making sure that mobile home parks were protected.
Okay.
Well, and I just have one more question about manufactured housing. And the way that people would be displaced would be through an increase in the lot rents. And Kurt's nodding his head, and so is Adam. But so that that is something that I think the Mobile Home Park Act enforcement legislation that was passed last year is trying to address through the rulemaking, as I understand it. I don't know if anybody can just. I've read through the rulemaking rules, and they are trying to address that by giving people the ability to obtain one-year leases as opposed to month-to-month, which is what most people have right now. So that's one thing. And I mean, I just really want to fully discuss this because we've gotten so much email on it, and I think that, well, I learned a lot through poking around on with questions. But one other thing that I learned about today was that the Opportunity Zone legislation actually has a small clause in it that was put in by Senator Cory Booker that helps, that can help small businesses. And if you could explain that a little bit, Chris, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, I can address it at a very high level, and then we can follow up if you want more additional information. But there are components where you can invest in a small business, maybe for equipment upgrades or something like that. So I have heard about businesses that are in that next phase of development where they're maybe going from startup to an initial phase of maybe production, where they need to do some equipment upgrades and they need capital for that. There are investors that are supporting small businesses and helping them make that next move, and they're using opportunity funds to help be able to do that.
Thank you. Cindy?
Well,
go ahead.
If we could get more information on that particular part of the program, that'd be helpful.
Sure.
Well, I was just going to say that I did not support this last time, and I'm not going to support it this time because we have gotten so much information just in sitting up here this evening, right now, that hasn't been available, at least to me. Maybe the rest of you have all had this available to you, that it seems to me that if we could go through some of these things more slowly with the moratorium in place and explain it so that the wider community is able to understand what's happening, it would just be easier for everyone involved, and we would get more buy-in that way rather than seeming like we're doing, just pushing something on. And the mobile homes alone, I think, are a huge piece of this, and making sure as best we can. And Chris just pointed out, said he'd heard of examples. One of the things that I've been looking for throughout has been examples of where these things have worked, you know, so that we can see that they actually do benefit the community rather than all the horror stories which we have heard, which I've heard plenty of at this point. And most recently, this New York Times article about Michael Milgan's Reno bending the rules, so to speak, as reported by the New York Times. So I'm really uncomfortable with us just kind of going ahead without, I don't see where the harm is in slowing it down. 6 more months?
Mirabai.
So I know we're going to have a new council if we decide to do this. I do like the idea of more buy-in because clearly there's upset within the community. I understand what was said up here today. I feel comfortable. However, I understand that the wider community may not feel comfortable. So just in talking through it, is there a way of pushing? We can still do everything that we've put in place because I think it's really helpful what we've done. But could we keep the moratorium on for like 3 more months and have one more session where the new council discusses this and we get some more information? I understand. I'm just, again, I like community buy-in, so.
Aaron.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, the harm of an additional time on the moratorium is the small business owners and property owners that are within the opportunity zone that aren't able to move forward with the plans that they've had for over a year that we have halted in their tracks, you know, and so I know of multiple folks who had very modest, not opportunity zone funding related plans, like for example, somebody who wants to put together a clean tech incubator in a small building, and they've been stopped dead for a year. So I think the harm is that. So if we thought that there were still major dangers after the changes we've made, then you'd say, well, okay, maybe we continue the moratorium. But I think the information that we've gotten from staff as we've learned it through is that, you know, no residents will be displaced. Our mobile home parks are safe from redevelopment, and you can't build a taller building unless you do affordable housing. And we just made these use table changes to make sure that any development that comes forward would be in alignment with our comprehensive plan goals. So, I mean, given all of that, I think you do cause harm to perfectly innocent, you know, small businesses and property owners by maintaining the moratorium.
So couldn't we do something, I'm sorry, I don't remember what project this was that we did this on before, but where some issues like that, you know, they come forward, tell us, and we say, okay, yeah, you can move forward on a kind of a case-by-case basis, but still keep it in place for 3 months just so we can get the rest of the community buy-in, but don't hold up important little again, I'm just trying to think of some ideas here because yes, we can pass it tonight. I feel comfortable with it, but again, the community doesn't, and I think that's one of the big things that we try to do. So I just trying to talk it through because I also don't want to hold up small businesses because that's incredibly important for our area.
Did anybody else want to speak?
I mean, I guess I'm pretty comfortable that we have put all the protections in place that we set out to do at the get-go. And I think that Aaron's point about the small businesses that are caught up in this is probably what I see as the biggest risk of not moving forward is because I know of a couple as well that I think are separate from the ones that you're talking about. So we got a note from a person who is trying to renovate their building right now, and they've had to wait for 10 months. Well, they wanted to make a small renovation. They will have no opportunity zone funding to do this work. And so I feel like we need to move forward with this. We can continue to ask more from staff about other risks that we haven't addressed that we may find later. But when Chris was talking about the investment that's being made in the physical plant of small companies, that's definitely something I've been reading about as well. But it's treated differently than the development of land and buildings. So I think it's got different ways that those investments are made and accounted.
So if I recall, it seems to me when we were talking about some other development, there, someone else, maybe it was Macy's, was complaining about being held up, and we were told that there was no holdup there in terms of doing interior reconstruction. Is that true, Chris, or are those all stopped as well?
Are you asking specifically with the project at Macy's?
Specifically at Macy's, but these others that have come up, and how many are there? I mean, are there 2? Are there a dozen? Are there 2 dozen? This is part of as well doing the assessment of what is it, what will the impact be? How many people are we holding up?
Specific to Macy's, that project submitted an application prior to the moratorium. I have heard examples of property owners or tenants that are looking to do improvements. I don't know who all else is out there because right now we aren't accepting applications. We have had some folks that they don't come in to see us right now because they know they can't submit an application and they're just waiting. So I've heard stories, but I don't have a quantifiable number for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bob?
Well, first, I want to thank Mary and Sam for very thoughtfully walking us through and asking some really, really good questions. And I thought it was a good education, certainly for me and probably other members of the community. One thing that I think didn't come out maybe clearly enough in the course of that discussion with Chris here this evening, and I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we still do have site review criteria on top of all of these things, on top of all the things that we talked about. And so no big project, and we can talk about what triggers a site review, but most big projects do, can be approved unless there's an application, there's a process with the city planning staff, and then the city planning board, and then ultimately call up by council. And so on top of all the various things that Marion and Sam, I think, did a good job of highlighting, we haven't lost our regulatory authority. We still have our land use authority. We can still determine what meets or doesn't meet our site review criteria, which we've changed, I think, pretty significantly, effectively through the change of the use table. So I want us to remember that nothing big can happen in the opportunity zone without it coming through here.
So
I would just say one thing to that, which is that we've seen lots of development come through here that the community and members of this council are unhappy with, starting right for the reason that the moratorium went in place and the height moratorium went in place in the first place. So.
Okay. Well, I appreciate this clarifying. Anything else we want to say about opportunity zones?
I want to say one more thing.
Okay.
So we received another email over the weekend, and it was asking questions about San Juan del Centro, which is a community that is just to the east of Orchard Grove, and it's HUD and Section 8 apartments. And along with receiving the email, I heard from residents who were concerned that they were going to lose their homes, they were going to be displaced because the owners were not going to renew the Section 8 and HUD designation. And so I happen to have all of the contact information for all of the leadership of the company that owns them now. They were just purchased last year, related affordable. And so I emailed their vice chairman and I said, is this true? I basically just forwarded that email. And they wrote back and they said, no, we're going to renew this. And this is what we do affordable housing. So we're not going to be tearing down the buildings and displacing anybody, save for when we are going to be remodeling the apartments. We may temporarily pay for alternative lodging for the people that are, whose apartment is being remodeled. So just wanted to tie a bow on it, just with all of the concerns that people raised over the weekend and through today.
San, can I add to that?
Yep.
Thanks for that, Mary, for bringing that up. And just that we got some additional information from staff through them to say that they understand that because of their low-income housing tax credit funding, which was done in 2007, that they have a 30-year requirement to maintain that site as affordable housing. So at a minimum, they have to maintain it through 2037. So we don't necessarily, I believe those folks that you emailed with, but we also don't have to rely upon that. They do have a legal commitment as well.
Okay, good conversation. There is one other item, which is item O.
May I speak to that?
Yep.
In your packet, you had a proposed amendment. Item O relates to the project at 30th and Pearl. As we've gotten close to closing on the financing and the construction, and two issues arose. The one that's identified in your packet is a city rule that says that the city cannot allow any construction over an easement. And so we generally do revocable permits to allow constructions over an easement. In this project, they want to build a parking garage and have what they call paseos, or sidewalks, on top of it as a walking area. We would normally do that with a revocable permit. We're told that they can't get financing with a revocable permit, that they need a permit. So the ordinance would authorize the issuance of permits to allow for the construction of these paseos over the parking garage. After we drafted that, we discovered a second problem, which is that under the federal tax rules, the project is being financed in part with low-income housing tax credits. Under those rules, you cannot have a common amenity that is subject to being paid for, required to paid for, not distributed evenly. This, as you know, the city's code embodies what we call the sump principles for parking, which requires separate, unbundled, managed, paid parking. And in this case, we are asking for what the proposed ordinance would give the city manager the authority to waive those requirements when necessary to have affordable housing like this. This doesn't come up all the time, but it has been a problem in other projects. So we're requesting that council pass these two proposed ordinances on emergency in 2O to make these two changes to help facilitate the construction of this important project.
Any questions about that? Okay, then. Go ahead. Oh, somebody wants to make a motion?
I had brought up, and I don't want to do anything about it tonight, but with regard to the budget, I had brought up a question about the CVB funding, and not so much the funding, but the rent that was being paid to the Chamber of Commerce. And it comes to something like $7,100 a month. And I don't think we have enough information to drill down to it, but I would hope that the next council will look into this. And is this really commensurate with what other people pay for space for their place? And is it comparable to what we have, like maybe down at the Boulder Street, at the Boulder Street Mall, you know, in terms of what your square footage prices is? It seems a little bit high, and I would hope we are getting what we are paying for in return, and that it needs to be, I would like to see a little more separation between are putting money into something that supports the city and our revenue, but also be cautious in putting money into the Chamber of Commerce in making sure it's not being more than it needs to be, and that they aren't running their own individual campaigns in election season. And I'll just leave it at that.
So, and I'll take it up there, because I got and I forwarded it to council, an email from the CVB. This is the Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is funded by city tax money, by accommodations tax and food and beverage tax in some areas of the city. So it's the chamber presentation. It's from the CVB saying that thank you, blah, blah, blah. As you requested, this is the presentation the Chamber Public Policy team gave, and it had to do with the Chamber's candidate forum, and then who they recommended. And this is all posted here with city money, with city, supposedly, it looks like it's condoning, because of course it doesn't give the other groups, whomever they may be, what their scorecards are. And so because this is all city tax money that's doing this kind of thing, I find it really amiss. And having been involved in campaign finance reform for such a long time and having such an interest in it, this is the very kind of thing that we are trying to stop. And this has probably gone on before, and how it has happened that we support the chamber in such a big way with the tax money that is paid to rent space for the CVB, and then the CVB is touting the chamber's candidates with our tax money. It is intolerable. So I'm just bringing that up, and I would hope that the campaign finance people in the city would look at this. It seems to me this is highly illegal. Mr. Carr?
Well, Cindy, you see that they have all the candidates listed, and they just list who their endorsements for.
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is exactly it. It is one community advocating for the persons whom they have chosen, and I do not think that it is sound policy for city tax money to be used for that.
But Cindy, they have all of the endorsements here, not just theirs. In fact, they don't have an endorsement here.
The chamber ballot scorecards is what I'm looking at, and I looked at them earlier. I'm not looking at them right now. I'm just looking.
So I see the chamber endorsement roundup on page 4 of the attachment. Well, we will certainly look at it if you like.
That's my concern.
Happy to do that.
Is that this is not something that should be in this particular place, in this particular way, funded by city money, tax money.
Okay, I have Aaron, and then Bob.
Yeah, so just speak up a little bit, since I'm one of the candidates on the ballot here this year. But just that no nonprofit is allowed to endorse candidates, and so no candidates have been endorsed by any nonprofit, including the Boulder Chamber. I've seen they, along with a number of other organizations, have put out scorecards where they say, what do the different candidates think about different issues, right? So a scorecard is not an endorsement. So anyway, I don't know about all the rest of the materials, but I just want to make that clear, that while various organizations have endorsed, that are political advocacy organizations, nonprofits, including the Boulder Chamber, have not endorsed any candidates.
Okay, we have Bob.
Sorry.
I just wanted to come back to Lisa's point. I'm currently the council liaison to the CVB. I don't know if I'll be that in the future, but what I will do, Lisa, in response to your question, is ask the CVB to prepare a memo for council, kind of summarizing in greater detail than what we got last week about the rent, and doing some comparables to other rent arrangements, just to make sure that it's market rate.
No, and that would be great. And as we discussed last week, it'd also be good to get CVB working with the city and the Sister Cities organization and the JCs, or people who are in
Rotary, yeah.
The Rotary,
Yep.
in improving, access. And so I'm happy with that. I just thought this seems like a lot of rent, and so it would be good just to get that.
Great, thanks.
So I just wanted to point out, Aaron, I hear what you say, but what they do is identify all of the candidates' positions, and specifically those who agree with the chamber's position. So, I mean, I look at this, and there are a lot of greens on there, and they're for some candidates, and then there are a lot of reds, and there's some golds, which is apparently not applicable. So all I'm saying is that this is city tax money that this has appeared to the wider public, and I do not think that it is correct to be doing this.
And that's a perfectly valid opinion. I just want to be clear that there's just not an endorsement, okay? Because I believe you used the term endorsement.
It's a fine line, and that's why we had this campaign finance reform group meet for the period of time they met when this council was first seated, was to try and make some distinctions, and perhaps that needs to be reconvened.
So Cindy, do you have a proposal with regards to this, or are you just
I'm
bringing
it
to our attention?
Yeah.
Do you want Tom to do anything about it, or?
I would like Tom to look into it, perhaps see, I mean, again, see how close.
Or the clerk, however you want to do it.
Right, legal clerk, and whether or not we need to revisit this, because this obviously, whether or not it is a conflict of interest, it doesn't smell good. It certainly gives the appearance of one. And again, using city money. So it's my contrarian last evening.
All right. Okay, and on that note, okay, so noted, and maybe the next council will want to look and see if they feel like this is something that needs to be addressed in terms of campaign. Because, each year, new stuff crops up, and we have to decide whether or not we feel like it feels right, given our campaign finance laws. So with that, this has been a long discussion about a long consent agenda that's got a lot of stuff in it. So with that, is there anything more to be said on any of these items? Otherwise, I'd like a motion.
I move the consent agenda.
I will second it.
With the
changes.
in
The amendments that we've made to 2D.
2D and 2O.
And 2O.
Okay. Do either of you want to say anything more?
No, as you said, we had a thorough discussion. It's a pretty meaty consent agenda, but it's good that this council is getting the work done, right?
And I'll just say I want to thank all of you who have been raising issues and bringing them to our attention. I think our final product is much the better because of it. So with that.
Okay, so roll call vote. We start with Councilmember Brockett.
Aye.
Carlisle.
Aye, except for item 2F, GHIJKL, which has to do with the budget, and 2N, which is the opportunity zone. And 2D, the ethics question, was one of the amendments, so I'm good with that.
Mayor Jones.
Aye.
Morzell.
Yes.
Nagel.
Aye.
Weaver.
Aye.
Yates.
Aye.
Young.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously with Councilmember Carlisle nay on 2F through L and 2N.
Okay.
Did you see? This is the chamber.
Yes, they are. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. We need some of you to come back. We need 5, right? Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and say it. You have one call up this evening, a use review for 954 North Street.
Okay. As soon as we have a quorum, we will see if anybody wants to speak to that.
It's not.
Okay, council, does anybody want to call up or have questions about 945 North?
No.
No? Okay, moving on.
Your public hearing for tonight, the second reading of ordinance 8361, adding Chapter 11, Police Oversight to Title II.
To go get some.
All right, thank you. I would like to start by thanking everyone for being here. I'd like to thank all of my wonderful task force colleagues for the many hours of work that they've put into this project. I would like to thank our facilitator, Dr. Carolyn Love, who is with us tonight, and all of the city staff for the assistance that we've given us.
And can you introduce yourself?
Oh,
it's coming. Okay, excellent.
Yes. So for those of you who have not met me yet, my name is Todd Conklin. I'm currently a student at CU. I'm a member of the task force. I have been asked to represent the task force as you move forward in the second reading of the ordinance tonight in hopes of final adoption of this ordinance. Okay. So as a reminder, the task force has recommended for your consideration an auditor-monitor oversight model combined with a police oversight panel made up of 11 diverse community members. The ordinance before you outlines the following. The city will hire an auditor-monitor to accept complaints involving police employees, monitor internal investigations to ensure objective, thorough, and high-quality investigations, and develop recommendations to improve police services and policies. They will also have access to all police data in order to carry out these functions. The initial auditor will be hired and held accountable to the city manager and will be housed physically in a location that is independent of the police department. Additionally, the auditor-monitor will act as a liaison and provide staff support to the police oversight panel. But they will not be a voting member of the police oversight panel, and they will not be a member. They will strictly be a liaison to that panel. They will also work to build relationships with the community and the police department. So the second part of this model is the police oversight panel. This panel will be made up of 11 diverse community members and also one representative from the police department that will act as a liaison. The representative from the police department will also not be a member, and they will be not voting on anything related to the police oversight panel. This panel will review completed investigations and give recommendations based on the disposition of the investigation and the level of discipline that should be carried out. It will also analyze data in collaboration with the auditor-monitor to make policy, program, and training recommendations to the chief of police. It will also provide feedback on the performance of the auditor-monitor. It will provide forums to hear community concerns regarding incident-specific police actions, broader questions regarding policing, and they will seek to foster healthy community relations between the police and the community. Going forward with this process, we want a phased implementation process. Given the level of detail that is going to be required and the complexity of the forthcoming implementation, we will continue forward as a task force with an implementation committee. Task force members who have agreed to participate through the phased implementation include myself, Sean Ray Pasalacqua, Sophia Pelicanos, Mike Rafiq, John Gifford, Michelle Dene, Michelle Simpson, Christian Gardner-Wood, 2 police representatives who are Carlene Hoffman and Pam Gignac. It is also anticipated by us as a task force that the staff who have been supporting this process to date will also continue their involvement, as well as members of the police department and staff.
Todd, so that sounds like most people. How many people aren't re-upping?
Off the top of my head, maybe around 3 or 4.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, and most of us are continuing on with implementation. So implementation details will include, but will not be limited to, development of a job description for all relevant parties, recruitment plans, an evaluation framework for the auditor-monitor, classification of complaints for police employees, makeup and manner of appointment of the Oversight Panel Selection Committee, standards of timeliness in investigation review and outcome, Oversight Panel decision-making process, term lengths and staggering of appointments, and further consideration of the role Boulder City Council and Human Relation Commission in the police oversight framework. So communities that endeavor to implement community police oversight models typically require 18 months to 2 years to successfully implement whichever model benefits their community. Given the level of detail required to consider, the task force recommends that in addition to the passage of the ordinance, that we move forward as an implementation committee, which we have already taken care of that part. And then we expect these changes with implementation to carry on into 2020. And then after we have done that process, we will come back to council, bring those changes, and then amend the original ordinance as needed to be. So thank you for all of your support throughout this process. We appreciate that. If anyone has any questions, I can take those now.
Bob?
That was a great presentation, Todd. Thanks very much for that. Two questions. I'll just give them both to you. You mentioned how long it normally takes. Can you tell me how long you guys think this one will take? And then also, will you have some check-ins with us along the way?
So it's hard to say how long it will take because we haven't yet started the implementation process. We're going to get up and running on that in about the next 2 weeks, we assume.
Okay.
And then once we have that, we can probably send a memo to council estimating how long we think it will take.
Okay.
And then what was your second question?
And then just, are you going to check in with us periodically along the way?
Sure, yes, we will.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Sure.
Aaron?
Todd, thanks very much for that presentation and all your work on this issue. So just to be completely clear, does your task force recommend the adoption of the ordinance as it's stated?
Yes, we do.
Great, thank you.
Lisa? And then Mary?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to thank you for your presentation, and I want to thank you and the group for the amount of time and the depth that you've gone into this issue. So,
thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a public hearing here before everybody gushes. Mary? Yes, you can.
Yeah, we can do that now, too.
We can gush before and after, I guess.
Okay, thank you. It was a great presentation. I do have a question about the letter that we received from the NAACP, and if you could address their concerns.
Sure. So we also debated that letter as a task force, and then in conjunction with city staff, I believe we sent a response to that letter to the NAACP. Off the top of my head, I don't remember all of the specific considerations they asked for. Do you have any specific questions regarding that?
Mm-hmm. Specifically, the recommendation that the final decision rest with the police chief.
Yes. So we debated that at length as a task force during our last meeting, and what we agreed upon was that we want to stand behind the model that we proposed to council and what is in the city ordinance. So that is what we will stand behind in regards to that.
Thank you.
Did you, okay. I was going to say, do you want to expound upon that?
Well, in the model that we originally proposed, the final decision was going to be left with the police chief, and that the investigation would go through the auditor monitor, who would then review it. Then it would also go to the police oversight panel, who would review the disposition, give a recommendation on that, and the discipline, give a recommendation on that, and then it would go to the police chief. That is what we decided as a task force, and that is what we believe is the best option, and we are comfortable with that.
Great, that's helpful.
So that raises another question for me. So one of the objectives of this panel is to increase, restore better trust in police. And so it seems to me that when the police chief is left with the final decision, there is some element of not being able to carry forth on that objective. So could you just comment on that, please?
Sure. So in designing the police oversight panel, we want to make it as accountable and as accessible to the community as they can be. And we think that in the process we have designed, that these investigations are going to be so good and so thorough and so well done that when the police chief makes a recommendation, we believe that they will be making the correct recommendation, as also determined by the panel and that auditor monitor as well. And then in addressing what you said, you wanted to be able to reach out to the community and have a good relationship. One of the other roles we have defined for the police oversight panel is that they're going to be holding community forums. They're going to be out talking to people, educating people about what they're doing, what needs to be done, what the goals are. And we think in doing that, that we will create a healthy relationship between the police, the community, and this panel as well.
And so that raises another question about I think that's great, maintaining the relationship with the community and doing the outreach. I think that will go a long way. But ultimately, what you want is to be able to somehow measure that the trust has been bettered. And how have you had any discussion about that or any ideas on how to do that?
So that mainly sounds like an implementation question. Once we get to the specific portion where we're determining the role of the police oversight panel, that will be specifically worked out, and then we'll send updates to council regarding that.
Thank you.
And Can I just ask a clarifying question? The recommendation of the panel and the auditor model will be public, right? So everybody will know whether or not that feedback was taken into account in the final decision, correct?
So I believe it's made public by the PSRP now, and if that is the case, then we would also like to continue that practice of making that public.
So we'll have a chance to see how that goes. Sam?
So was there any discussion, to Mary's point, was there any discussion of doing statistically valid surveys of both the community as a whole, but then potentially underrepresented groups within the community to try and do that perception piece that Mary's talking about, so that there could be a baseline established? And then as the process runs over the course of many years, we could track what the perceptions are. Are they changing in a positive way? Are they going the other way? Did you guys talk about any of the details around that?
So that will also be an implementation question, but that is going to be absolutely critical, is constant outreach to community. So whatever form that takes in the question you asked, we will absolutely be doing some form of that, of constantly reaching out to the community to gauge how they feel.
Okay, great. The only point I would make for you to take back is we've been having pretty good experience with statistically valid surveys in a few of the processes we've been running. And so this might be another one that's right for that. I wouldn't know how to design it myself, but I'm sure there are people who could.
Well, and I'm curious, Jane, do we get at any of that, how people are feeling about the police department in our periodic statistical survey?
Every other year, we have a community survey, and we do get that information. And the police department usually comes out very positively. I think that this kind of survey that you're talking about would need to go deeper. Than that. I don't want to say that our survey is superficial, but it's just asking sort of an easy question. And I don't think that we have broken it down based on demographics. I think we probably could do that, but I just feel like more questions would really get at the perception, who feels that way, and the basis for it. So I think the idea of a different survey would be the right thing.
Great, that's helpful. Other questions? Well, thank you, Todd. I think we're going to open it up to the public hearing.
You have 3 people.
3 people?
Yes, the first one is Mark Bliley.
Oh, Mark. So every speaker will get 3 minutes.
Hello, Council. Officer Mark Bliley, Union President of Boulder Police Department. I first want to wish those who are leaving before us happy endeavors on your new chapter in your life, so I sincerely wish you the best. I want to speak on behalf of over 180 sworn officers at the Boulder Police Department as we move into the next phase of the oversight. I know that a lot of work has gone into getting to where we are today. I want to recognize the task force for a lot of layers that they had to learn and research and get through to where we are today in such a short period of time. And I know they referenced a few minutes ago about how this normally, when it's all said and done, can take up to 18 months. So with that being said, there's still a lot of work ahead of us, and I want to acknowledge that work that is before us, but not only as a challenge, but as an opportunity in working with the police department. One of the things that in this ordinance, on the very first page, is on this proposed ordinance, it states in section 211.1 and section E, in part, not reading the whole thing, that council recognizes that further work is needed to implement this chapter. So I am up here today as a reminder, and as we recognize as a police department, my membership, that there's still a lot of work to do. Because in effort with that direction, again, we look for this as an opportunity with the subcommittee and having a couple of our officers involved, myself included, when necessary, as one of the persons who subject matter expert, those kind of things on these areas. The Boulder Police Officers Association and the Boulder Police Union has identified several areas that we have concerns about how it's initially put together. but also knowing that these things should be worked out in time, those details that will allow us, as long as we are given that time and not rush to any kind of final outcome in this. We also know in closing that this is a collective effort. This is not only involving police, task force, but at the community as well, and instilling some of those things you talked about on the survey. But it's also for our officers who have to live with the final outcome product that will, as in this last oversight thing, was in place for over a couple decades. So we know it's something that we have to be comfortable in knowing that we can live with, again, for the officers and for the community as a whole. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next up is Darren O'Connor.
Hi, Council. I want to reiterate what Mark shared about wishing you the best, those of you who are leaving Council, some of you after a very long time. Thank you for your service. And I also want to thank the task force members, Todd and Dr. Love, who are here tonight, and all those who are wisely sitting at home, probably warm, I hope, for their hard work. We as the NAACP did send some concerns with the ordinance as we read it, and the feedback we got mainly addressed either misunderstandings or clarified things that personally made me feel better about it. For example, that the final police oversight panel will not have a voting member who is a police officer or the auditor monitor. And while we, I think, still disagree on the final position that the police chief should make final decisions, we certainly recognize that they put in a lot of work and come to that decision quite knowledgeable. My concern personally is that, we have a very good model of this in Denver. It's a very similar oversight model. They have an Office of Independent Monitor, and the citizens had to go to the polls and change the law there because police were stymieing his efforts to do his job. Now, I don't know if that will happen here, but we know it's happened. We know that in Denver, he has put out recommendations, and the police haven't followed it. I think there's a belief here that that just won't happen. We'll just have to see. I'm concerned that the last time this was discussed, or in the public hearing, that the interim chief of police felt comfortable saying that his officers were scared. Scared by this process, scared by the oversight, when this whole effort is really about getting community comfort with the oversight of the police, and I would hope that they would welcome that, and that just looking at the incredible work that this task force did, that we should all see a model, and I think you all do, and I appreciate how much you guys have all really backed this effort. There's been so much support and understanding of their hard work that I really appreciate all of you have given that. And I think our police ultimately, I just don't understand how they can be scared of the community they serve, asking them to treat that community fairly. That's it. Thank you.
I just have a quick comment. I would just make the comment or the observation that change is often scary. And so it may be perhaps not a fear of the community so much as a fear of what the process will look like. Mm-hmm. And so I think it'll be great work for everyone to do together with the task force to be able to make sure that we get an outcome that really is serving our community. And so I just wanted to put out the observation it could be a fear of change.
Thanks, Sam. Councilman Weaver, sorry. I also want to say that I will be licensed on November 5th and would be happy to provide independent review if you need it of the ethics issue. I'll be qualified. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Sammy Lawrence, the fourth.
I gotta say in the very beginning, that's one of the first times you called me at the fourth. I gotta appreciate that because, as I've said before, I'm not my father, nor my father's father, nor my father's father's father. I am the fourth. So, that being said, hello, City Council. Nice to see everyone today. Gotta jump in the same bandwagon again and thank everybody that has been a part of this task force. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Love, as well as thank you. It's very amazing to see the work that has been done. I haven't been able to follow all the way because time frames change, and with that, disabilities show up a little later in the night, so not really a good idea to be out that late. That being said, early this year, the people of the city cried out and demanded change, a shift from a draconian escapade of allotting the BPD to handle investigating its own. Zaid Atkinson, Michelle Rodriguez, Kelly Clark, and I are all examples from this year alone of their failures. Likewise, some of you that sit opposite of me are part of allotting this type of behavior. In response to this decry, 13 members of this community, coupled with the assistance from officers and an amazing facilitator, have created unto us these models. I thank everyone involved in this matter. That being said, we go from April to October to the recent past to see our leaders acquiescent as PD reps emphasize resistance to full and independent oversight. We have already decided as a community that our PD cannot be trusted to investigate themselves, nor make those calls. We as a community have the scars to back our stance. True healing starts when you are independent of the things hurting you. So stop getting in the way of our healing. PD, you have had too much comfort being a helicopter parent without taking the time to listen to your community, your children, the people you protect and you serve. Likewise, to members of our community, we need to work together. I know this is difficult right now. This is an opportunity for us, the traumatized community, to work together to start healing. I believe in all of you to do what's right. Thank you for your time. And again, thank you everyone for your support in this. One more person is too much. And I say that with my own body. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn Siegel.
Lynn Siegel, 538 Dewey. After the Elk experience, I have very little trust of the police in Boulder. It's going to be a high bar because I tried to go to the trial and I was thrown out of the trial for asking the air conditioning to be turned down. And I happened to ask the next expert witness, who is the PhD in exercise physiology or something, Stan Garnett's star witness. And I just saw him as an authority figure, and I said, do you think they could turn the heat down in here? You know, it was, or no, the air conditioning. It was really cool. It was the summer. And I can't bring all my warm clothes in the summertime to the courtroom. And my panniers won't fit it that much in my bike. So I was thrown out, and I wanted to watch that trial for a week, and I'd already put in a day and a half. And so I'm real pissed off. It reminds me of Stan Garnett and Jill Grano and Jay Hebb and Fru House. The whole thing just makes me real upset all over again. Makes me think way back to Lefferdink. Cindy remembers him probably. The Lefferdink that, you know, ripped off the city people with the Colorado building and then left on his helicopter, you know, escaping with his girlfriend to be picked up later on. So I don't have a lot of faith in this community for justice, but then I'm from the coast. And community policing and restorative justice, I've heard talk about it for 30 years, and it's just a lot of talk. And when I try to intervene at all with the police, I get really treated badly, and I don't appreciate it. And so I hope that your police oversight thing is going to work out, because as it stands, I'm not going to call the police, not if my life depended on it in this town. Not after the next door thing that's some Halloween deal of a lynched person on 11th or 10th and Delwood. And, you know, there's some serious people around this town that I've got some really demented ideas, and this is not a Halloween thing, you know. There's serious issues here, and I'd like to depend upon my police, but not as it stands. So good luck.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, that's all that's signed up. Okay, we're going to close the public hearing. Okay, I'm going to make a motion then. Oh, were you?
I'd be happy to make a motion.
All right.
If I can find it. I move that we adopt ordinance 8361, amending Title II by adding a new Chapter 11, Police Oversight, BRC 1981, pertaining to the composition, duties, and powers of a new city organization related to civilian oversight of the police.
Second. Would you like to speak to that?
I think that this has been a good change, a good move. I'm extremely grateful to the task force. I think they've done such a thorough job in a very short period of time. I do trust that our police will be taking up, as they should be, their end of the bargain here, and look forward to seeing the positive change that will be happening in the community.
And I would just add, I think we've talked in the past, it bears repeating, just how thankful we are to the task force for all the work they put in, and for really, I think, embodying a coming together of the community and really working through the issues. And watching you last, I guess it was a study session, how mindful you were about the differences of opinions even within your group, and how you treated the minority opinion within your recommendations was really exemplary and eye-opening. So anyhow, I'm very pleased that so many of the task force members are willing to stay on and help with implementation. I think that is, well, it's a credit to all of you. And I appreciate the way that you are addressing some of these. These are tricky issues. These are hard issues, and you're doing it, I think, very respectfully with the police department, and trying to craft something that will work for them as well, so that it will actually be embraced and lead to meaningful evolution of racial bias and racial equity in our community. So I guess I just salute you. I think my understanding is, as you guys figure out implementation details, that if need be, the next council will probably have to amend the ordinance to add in all those details. And I also hope that in addition just to addressing how complaints are handled, that the panel could end up helping to further community engagement and development of the relationship between the community and the police, by making recommendations of how that might be done beyond just the complaint process, but actually enhancing relationships. So, thank you. I saw Mary, and then Sam, and then Aaron.
So never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change police process. So thank you guys very much for your very hard work. And I completely agree with what both Cindy and Suzanne have said. your hard work was exemplary, and the amount of time in which you did it was just mind-boggling. And it was a well-selected group of people, and a well-selected facilitator. So thank you very much. I just have just a few things to perhaps have you think about as you go through the implementation process. And that would be to consider a, I asked about the final decision resting with the police chief. And I was trying to think of I do have it's the appearance of, I think a lot of community members may not memorize what the process of the panel looks like, and trust that the outcomes have been thoroughly vetted. So one thing that I would suggest that you consider looking at is to provide the police chief and the auditor monitor with equal standing. So and what I was thinking about was, in the city we have a process by which we approve area plans, getting a little wonky here, but where the planning board and the city council have equal say on voting, they have equal power. And what happens is, if one body doesn't agree fully with the plan, then they make some suggestions and it goes to the other body. And that goes back and forth until they resolve. And so that might be something to consider, that kind of model. And then the other thing I wanted to suggest was, I mentioned trust. And I think it's going to be very important to provide some metric. It's probably going to be more qualitative than quantitative. So just really have a look at that. And then the other thing that might be helpful would be to run the Atkinson case through the process and see where it would end up given this new model, or any of the other cases, to see how it works. So those are just some suggestions, and thank you once again. Sam.
So I just want us to go back to the weeks after March 1st and realize at that time, there was so much deserved community anger about what had occurred. And, sitting here in these chambers on the 18th and hearing that, I'm just so grateful that we've gotten to this place so far, because it's a huge amount of progress. It's obviously, you've been praised for your work, and I agree with all of that. But I just want to say, as an overall community, and not just the task force, I feel like there have been some very difficult conversations that needed to be had, and they have been not completely had, but they've been started. And this feels like a really good place to have arrived at, given where we started, and given the community anger and frustration and unhappiness. And now we're at this place where you have done a whole bunch of work that has got us this great work product now, and I'm hopeful that it can continue on as thoroughly and positively, because I really do feel like it's moved the community along as a community. And so I know that the conversations will still be tough, but that's okay. The good work requires tough conversations. And so I appreciate you engaging in them. I look forward to seeing where we're going to go, and thanks for all your work.
Yes, so I want to agree with everything that my colleagues have said. Sam, that was very well put just now. And I also wanted to thank the NAACP for their contributions to this process. You know, Mary and I sat down with Darren and Jude and Annette from the NAACP to select the task force panelists. And it was a very productive process, although challenging sometimes. But I think the folks on the task force have done an extraordinary job. I mean, really, I hadn't imagined it would, the quality of the work would be so high. And so look very much forward to passing this tonight. You know, we have like Sam said, we've come a couple of important steps down a road towards rebuilding and improving trust with the community, particularly folks of color, African Americans in the community. This is a long journey. And this is one step that we're taking tonight. I think it's an important one, but we have many more steps, and I'm committed personally to doing what I can to help continue down that path.
Okay. Well, with that.
Okay, this is a roll call vote. Councilmember Carlisle?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Warzel?
Yes.
Nagel?
Aye.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yates?
Aye.
Young?
Yes.
Brockett?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Yeah. Thank you all so much.
Good job.
Your council priorities update is next.
Okay. Can I borrow your call?
Yeah, tell them to look at, in particular at the housing protection section of the ordinance, which they probably don't understand demolition, but demolition doesn't mean tear down completely. It can mean any
Why don't we just
hollowing out of the shell. So, you know, we asked Chris about that. We don't know.
Do you remember what the ordinance was? This one? It's going to be these guys. They're reading. Is it going to be one of these guys then?
Just overlay.
I meant to say this during the discussion about the opportunity zone. Maybe, yeah.
We might be home by 10 o'clock.
No, we're going to go drinking.
Priorities.
I had a conversation with Scott Holden today.
Okay.
And he really confirmed that he, as much as said it, what this council has done has really tamped down commercial.
That's great.
And I said, that's great. And he said, yeah. He agreed. I mean,
cool.
That, yeah. And I said I can do other things, like build affordable housing.
Exactly.
Do we want to get going with this, or are we waiting for Suzanne?
I think we could get started.
Yeah. Okay. So CAC and council requested that we end our amazing two-year council session with a discussion of council priorities update and future priorities discussion. So Tom could turn to the next slide. So as a result of our conversations in the first retreat that we did in 2018 and the one that we did in January of 2019, we had a number of priorities. We've created a slide that shows where we are. You've completed most of them. Bill Cowan did ask me to talk a little bit about the Vision 01 we've indicated as complete. And of course, the truth about the substance of Vision Zero is it will never be complete. We'll always be working on it. But we marked it as complete because we wanted to finish the transportation master plan and the safety report that we did give to council. So those specific things that we had indicated in the council retreats early on have been completed, but we will always be working on Vision Zero. A couple of the items are in progress, and in the course of the time that we were working with council, we ended up breaking up the community benefit and the use tables into 2 different phases, but the first phase is in fact complete. And then the one item that I think remains on hold, I guess I'll say, is the large homes and lots, which was actually added at the retreat in 2019, and so we didn't have a full 2 years to do that one. But I have to say that council rocked it in this 2-year period of time, and that you've completed most of your priorities. So if you want to discuss that, you can do that. And then the next discussion will just be led by the mayor regarding your 2020 suggested priorities.
So I had one clarification, which was, I'm not presuming to tell the next council what their priorities are. What I meant was for us to do a handoff of issues that you will inherit. And you will do with them what you will, but some of these things are already in motion, and I wanted to just have a little bit of a community conversation and hand off, because, yes, they're going to land in your lap, and some of them are really important and they're pending. So I think that's more what I wanted to make sure we did. So well, let's talk about the body of work that's on this slide, and then maybe we can talk about some additional things that we some of us wrote in about. Bob?
I just want to make it more of an observation and a recommendation to the next council. I think these were great goals, and I think a lot of was accomplished in the last couple of years. I think we should be very proud of what we've accomplished. A couple of the topics, and Jane called it out in Vision Zero, and I can think of some other things like maybe climate commitment, are really ongoing things, and I would recommend, while I think it's important to keep those front and center, Vision Zero and climate commitments, some other things, I think it'd be probably helpful for the next council to have distinct, measurable, achievable, concrete goals, so we can check the box. So I mean, climate commitment, for example, that will be, I'm sad to say, that will be something that will probably be on council's agenda for many, 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 many years, and so it'd be nice to break that down into achievable, actionable items, so that we can look back, whoever looks back 2 years from now or 4 years from now and say, all right, these are the 5 things we wanted to get done, for example, on climate commitment, and we got 4 of them done or all 5 of them done. So I just think we should be a little bit more actionable, or the next council should be a little bit more actionable. I think these are great things, and I'm really happy with what we got done.
And there's some of the piece, well, anyhow, I'll jump back in. Do others people want to speak to this? Okay, I'm going to wax a little bit. A bunch of these things were pretty complicated, had been ideas for a while, and I guess I just want to salute the work that went into crafting them. I mean, the community benefit piece, the site review criteria, the use tables, I mean, that's hard, slogging sort of work, and really, really important. So, and some of those have a phase 2 that I think is really important, and I guess I would urge the next council to get those across the finish line, because they're well on their way. I am sorry that we didn't get to large homes and lots. I think that probably needs to be reframed in a way with bite-sized pieces, or pizzas, if you wish, that can be addressed. But I still think that's an issue. I also want to, I think there's certain issues that we should also make sure to keep the public engaged on and updated on, ones that are spanning multiple years. I think municipalization is one of those. Mm-hmm. It's a priority. A lot of work is going into it. A lot of money is going into it. And it's very important. And I think the next year and a half, I wish it was just the next year. But the next couple of years are going to be really important, and I think it's incumbent upon the next council to ensure that the community discussion about that happen in a very public way, in a very inclusive way. Okay, maybe I'll quit talking for a little bit. Okay, I saw Lisa and then Mary, and then Sam.
Yeah, I was going to concur with you, Suzanne, that there's been an incredible amount of work, not only by council, but by the staff who has supported us, and by the community who has followed this. And even though we have large homes and large lots on hold, there is an incredible amount of work that our staff put into, and I would hope that doesn't go away, and that that work was well done, and that maybe it has to be done in different bite chunks or pizzas. But I think it's something that there needs to be more of a robust conversation by the community. But, and like I said earlier tonight, none of these projects get done by just turning a switch on, and that they're really complex, and that you have multiple players, multiple aspects of it that you have to consider before you can go to the next step. So anyway, I'm good with this. I didn't bring up anything in this regard, and I'll just leave my comments till later. I did bring up an issue of indexing so people can more easily, and I didn't mean the council members, I meant the community can more easily follow our different topics and follow them sequentially so they know where things are and can easily put their finger on them and find them.
Mary.
So I'll concur with Suzanne's assessment, and hopefully it'll be a smooth handoff. But I agree with Lisa, too. A lot of these have taken a long, long time, but I also think that this is my third council, and this is probably by far the council that has accomplished the most, in my view, and also in less than 50 meetings. My first,
really?
Yeah, my first council, we had gone over 50 meetings in September, and I remember staying up till 1:30 a lot, and I don't remember this level of accomplishment. So. Kudos to this council and to staff who supported all this. I mean, you guys do the heavy lifting, and the amount of creativity in the timeframes that were provided, I think, was just outstanding. So big thanks to staff. And I also want to say, to Lisa's point about turning the switch, the community benefit project, and it's only the phase one, but that's been something that I've been advocating for 12 years. So it was very gratifying to see that finally happen, and the site review criteria updates that I have been going to retreat after retreat after retreat until it finally happened. So anyway, we'll talk more about the other priorities.
So I just want to thank staff. This is a very planning-heavy set of accomplishments that we got, which meant that our planning staff had to really prioritize and then tick down through the things, where Mary has been looking for community benefit and putting that into site plan review. I've been very supportive of that, but I have been wanting to see the use tables and standards had to look at, because it's been 20 years since that has last happened, and a lot changes in 20 years. And so just kudos to staff for that. I'm also pleased that we have the middle income down payment pilot in front of the voters. They will speak. Maybe I could have done a slightly better job at the ballot language phrasing. I didn't catch an error I could have. But still in all, it's there and the substance is there, and we will see if the community is willing to let us borrow money to get people into middle-income housing. I just want to call out, the South Boulder Creek flood mitigation project. That is going to land in the next council and then the council after that. I mean, realistically, if you look at both the permitting and the construction time, that's going to push us out, a couple councils. And so the next council will have to look at that project as something that we need to move forward with all due speed. But it's a design and engineering project, and it's going to require Army Corps of Engineers, EPA, the state dam safety engineer. There's a lot of layers to what is going to happen in that South Boulder Creek flood mitigation project, and there's partners that we don't have direct control of in CDOT, in CU, and so on. So there will have to be some finesse in that one. But I think overall, staff has really done good. This council's done pretty good, and that's a long list of stuff.
Aaron. All right, then we're going to go through some
news. I
news
was going to follow on that a little bit. Yeah, and I'll just quickly, I'll call out the Open Space Master Plan, which was a process that I thought went extremely well. Mary and I, of course, served on the subcommittee for many, many months, and so I thought the engagement with the community was fantastic on that. I'm proud that we all got that done. And I think the one that we have made the less progress than I would have liked to, particular, is that South Boulder Creek flood mitigation. And so I think it's really, as you say, Sam, incumbent on the next council to keep that on track and move it forward and get the protection for our residents that they really need.
Okay, I want to mention some of the other things.
Just going to mention
just one more thing. Lisa,
I was just going to mention one more thing, and that is that we're finally doing another major sub-community plan. And I came out of the North Boulder sub-community plan, and I think it's an incredible way to do planning on including the community and really getting a good view and vision for what the community wants in their part of town. And so I'm very excited that we have that, and it'll be the second sub-community plan. So that's all I wanted to mention, is that I think it's very exciting, and that it will be a heavy lift, and it'll be really incumbent that we keep and get involved the community so that they're very much involved in what the shaping of their community is going to look like.
Okay, so I wanted to launch. Did you want to respond to that?
Well, no. I just realized the one that we haven't mentioned is the Housing Advisory Board, which has been a long-held goal. And I see actually 2 members of the Housing Advisory Board out in the audience. Hi, y'all. Thanks for all the great work that you've been doing since that board was formed. So, Lisa, of course, this is a priority of yours for very long.
So I'm
they're doing
really,
good work.
Thank you, Aaron, for bringing that up. I'm very excited. It's been seated, and it is operating well. So thank you.
So some additional topics not on this list that the new council will inherit that I just wanted to hold up. In addition to CU South, which of course has an asterisk next to it, and the whole annexation issue, and Alpine Balsam. But we just saw a piece of the racial equity work we're trying to do, and it goes deeper than that, and I hope the new council can somehow get immersed in that, and because I think that's an important journey we're on as a community. As a related but different part of that is that we're in formal tribal consultations with, I forget how many tribes, a whole bunch of tribes, 13. And the tribes are coming back here in the spring, and we'll take the next step together. But that's important, and will involve, I think most of council participated in the last meetings, and it was pretty profound, moving stuff. But that's something that I think is important. It'll be on the work plan. We also promised the Library Commission that we would have a robust discussion about how to fund the library long-term, and whether it should be via a district or some other mechanism. So I think it's important that we honor that. Another project that's out there ready for attention, regardless of how you feel about the particulars, but University Hill still needs a catalyst project to help move the commercial district forward. And I would encourage the new council to not, again, regardless of whether you like the one on the table, that needs some good attention and to be moved forward. Just a couple more things. I hope Diagonal Plaza gets some attention. And maybe whether it's an area plan or something, but I do think that maybe that issue is ripening and we have a chance to move forward. The Climate Mobilization Action Plan is off to a really great start. There were hundreds of people that came to the kickoff, and that will be a joyful, even though the topic is serious, I think there's a lot of energy in the community around that, and the next council will get to participate and adopt that. And as part of that, one of the hopeful things is the carbon sequestration piece to that. Couple more. One that I think could fall through the cracks if we're not careful, but is we can't begin talking about soon enough, is the 2020 ballot. And we are a part of a regional affordable housing strategy, and we're in discussions with other municipalities in the county about how to fund that. And how the ball was left on the court was that it's likely that we'd want to do something on the 2020 ballot. And maybe that would be connected to transportation, or maybe that wouldn't. But that's a really important conversation, and it always sneaks, the ballot always sneaks up on us. And I guess, anyhow, that involves a lot of other players, and I hope somehow that the new council will start early in the spring on that one. And then at some point, sorry, I have a couple more. One is, there's a lot of, in the municipalities around us and basically our neighbors, there's a lot of new council members, there's new councils. And we have a tradition of sometimes having dinners or breakfasts with neighboring cities. And I guess I would encourage the new council to embrace that tradition, all the more so because there's a lot of turnover out there. And there's a chance for new partnerships and new relationships. And we just started that with Naropa University, or restarted it. I think we started it. And anyhow, there's just a lot of great partnerships that could use some fostering. But I'm going to quit talking now, but at the end, I would like to talk about, I guess the other big thing is there's a lot of regional transportation issues that are moving that involve us, and that as mayor, I was playing a role in that I would like to make sure we hand off. But since I feel like I've been talking too long, I'm going to come back to that at the end. Did other people want to speak? Sam, and then Mary.
So I didn't get things sent in like other council members did, but there are a few things. One of the ones I want to call out is just to make sure I understand what it is. It says, bless you. Sorry. It says all of council bike skateboard areas rules. I assume this is like where we can bike on sidewalks and where skateboards can be, and I would throw in there's the related thing about what we're going to do with e-scooters. So e-scooters, we have a moratorium in place, but we don't have a set of rules developed yet for them. So I would just lump all of those alternative transportation things. I really do hope that the next council addresses making the rules clear for where bikes can be in multi-use paths or lanes or on sidewalks. So that was one thing. And then another thing that is still hanging out there is the electronic signature gathering. So that the RFP's been done. And I expect the IT department at some point will see who got that contract. But then, how long is that process realistically going to take? Because I know the conversations with the Secretary of State have been started. I know the conversation with the clerk has been started. When I've spoken with those two folks, they have a pretty high level of concern for data security and so on. So I think, being realistic and highlighting what the likely schedule is something that should probably come early so that the council can see it and figure out where it fits in the spectrum of things.
Sam, you're mentioning that reminded me that there has been a request by persons who were on the first task force on the voting to put a group into place, a public group such as that one, to be involved in this process. And at the time, for some reason, I thought there were quite a few nods up here that we would go forward with that. And I don't see any harm in it. Are there any thoughts about doing something like that so that it's not just staff, or it's not that we throw it back out to the community to help with that?
Well, I mean, the question is, will it slow it down? Will it speed it up? Will it get it directed more correctly or less correctly? I don't know the answers to those questions. If the concern, I mean, I guess for me, I want to see who gets the award and how they're thinking about it. You know, just an initial conversation where how do they think they can relate to the other people who have data that they'll need to interface with. And then it might be time to have a conversation about a task force, because then you could have something maybe to talk about specifically. So I figured the next council would make that decision.
Bob?
Taylor, I'd been feeding to Taylor kind of random thoughts over the last several months. So the things that are in the memo are not things, the half dozen things that I suggested, are not things that I feel super strongly about. The next council could take a look at that at the retreat. But the one thing I do feel pretty strongly about, which is not on my list, but I think it's on Mary's, I'm sure Mary will have something to say about this as well, is really a deep dive into the budget. You know, I'm concerned, while I think we did a lot of good things and a lot of things well the last year or two, I am concerned about a few things on our budget. One is I don't think that we're quite holistic enough in our approach to our needs. Things come along and we want to do them, and that's great, but we may not look at things across the board the way we should. I also worry that we have pressure on revenues. We've already started to see that with our sales and use tax, which of course is our number one source of funding. And I think it's only going to get worse. You know, all the reports we hear out there is there's going to be some macro headwinds as well. And so I think we may just be seeing the tip of the iceberg. So I think that we need to, number one, prepare for a revenue downturn. And secondly, regardless of whether our revenue takes a dip, I think we need to set the groundwork for not only the next council, but future councils in looking at our expenses and our priorities holistically rather than in silos. And so I would very much like to see that be a priority for the next council. Maybe it's another Blue Ribbon Commission, maybe it's simply council rolling up its sleeves and looking at things across the board, but I think that's probably would be my number one priority for the next council.
Mary?
And I will agree with that, Bob. And I think that a deep dive into the budget could also encompass several other things that others have talked about here tonight, which one was taking a look at the library finances. It could encompass that, as well as encompassing the GARE work, the Government Alliance on Racial Equity work that is going on in the city. There's no better way to begin to address equity than to do it through the way the city spends its money. And then thirdly, the EMS, emergency medical services, and bringing them into the fold of the city. And so those are things that I think could be looked at as part of the deep dive. But I agree, I think it's critical that we begin to make decisions, especially when we approve master plans, that we see all the levers all at once so that we're not drawn to the latest shiny object and then at lesser than optimal consequences. So that's one that I would hope gets priority in the next council. Another one that I hope gets some priority, and I think it has to happen either way, because we're leading up to a vote on the municipal utility, and I want to say this without any kind of bias for one way or the other. I think we just need to have a community conversation about it. openly, and there are many philosophical aspects of it that only the community can have. And I think that there are very many factual pieces of it, too, that need to be, everybody needs to be clear on. So I hope we can do that. And then the other thing that I will bring up at the retreat and see if folks want to at least take a look at, and that is ranked choice voting.
Say again?
Ranked choice voting. Oh. I've been very concerned with this year being the second time that the appearance of the slate phenomenon happens. And I fear that what it does is it pulls us sideways instead of forwards. And I would like to take a look at this ranked choice voting as perhaps a way to help us move forward a little better than being pulled sideways every other year. So that's all I have. Goodbye.
So I will jump on board with the budget discussion. I would love to see a deeper dive into that, because I'm hoping maybe we can figure out some funding for then, as Mary said, and I was going to discuss, was bringing our ALS, which are advanced life support, into our fire services, just so we can join the front range community in what everyone is currently doing. And we're going to need, from my understanding, although I don't think we had the numbers ever, but it sounds like we're going to need some money for that. And then finally, I'd really like to make sure, because I think our police master plan is coming out, just to make sure that we're going to have room in the budget to fund and support our officers, because, you know, I think the work, I think there can be a lot of frustration in our community with some of the behaviors, and I think we're trying to rectify that. But I do think that our police force is something that needs to stay robust, and we need well-trained, well-informed officers to help keep the public safety intact. I think that's one of our highest, priorities here. So I just want to make sure that we have enough money to be able to provide what they're going to request when that master plan comes out. So those are, and then the other thing I'd like to look at, and I'll bring it up during the retreat, is that, we do tend to get these shiny objects, as Mary said, every once in a while that tend to kind of throw off our schedule. So maybe we can look into building every quarter, like leaving a hold space for any surprises, like the vaping issue that was really important to address, but came out of nowhere perceivably. And so every quarter that we kind of have a space built in for that shiny object that we'll need to address. So something along those lines.
Aaron.
Just a couple more thoughts. I know we talked about with transportation that Vision Zero is an ongoing project, but right, we've got our transportation master plan which we accomplished, which is great, and we've started, we've done a lot of great work on Vision Zero, but I just want to make sure that we continue to stay focused on those important transportation and transportation safety issues, as well as on the regional transportation things, which Zan's going to talk about a little more here in a minute. And so those are critical. I just want to bring it, so a lot of the planning work that we've done this year has been focused on, say, making sure we don't get things that we're concerned about. But I hope that the new council will also take a look at how we might tweak our policies so that we get some additional sort of housing in places like Diagonal Plaza, like Suzanne mentioned, in kind of walkable mixed-use kind of neighborhoods, because I think we do have a critical need for housing with an emphasis on affordability. So I'd love to see us undertake some things that would help us get some more of that critically needed things. But we're all throwing out a lot of important initiatives. But Mirabai, I like what you said about a holding place for things that come up, because I think sometimes we can, with our ambitions, we can take on too large a list of priorities, and we end up exhausting staff, exhausting ourselves, and exhausting the community. It makes it hard to keep up. So I think the pace has been better this year than it has been in some other years. But I think I'd just like to offer a word of recommendation to maybe focus in. Maybe a little bit more.
Lisa, then Sam.
So I appreciate the reserve or the little quarterly hold, but a couple years ago, Bob and we did the retreat committee and trying to for 2 years in a row. And in each one of those, we tried to schedule extra time for bright, shiny objects. But what happens is that our schedule gets completely full. And so you will have to be very disciplined and not take on so much at the beginning in order to keep that reserve. With regard to Diagonal Plaza, I would love to see that done. And again, if it was easy, it would have been done. And in fact, back in the mid-90s, many of us wanted to see that redeveloped. We even had the city do an appraisal in terms of how much that property was worth. There's multiple ownerships on that property, and it's private property. So for us to kind of push, it would require a condemnation. And in all my years in being on council, I only know of one condemnation, and that was for somebody building a house on open space. And so it's not such an easy thing to do, but I do bid you well in trying to get that done. And I will just remind everyone that the Rocky Mountain Greenway is still an idea that is in effect, that starts from DIA and goes through all the national refuges and then comes up through Boulder and then eventually to Rocky Mountain National Park. And so from my perspective, they're working on, the refuges, but where will be our next biggest step will be going from North Boulder all the way up to Lyons and identifying a pathway, a safe pathway forward on the east side of 36. And then people are bringing up the EMS people, and I have no problem in bringing them in-house, but I would not be true to myself and to custodians who have worked for the city that while we have brought them up to a self-sufficiency wage, we still do not have them receiving the same benefits that all of our other employees receive. And those benefits are incredible. And as Mary said, maybe the best way to look at racial equity is to be looking at our budget.
Sam.
So I just want to tag on to the budget. I agree with wanting to do a deeper dive into that. It's a complicated subject, and I'm afraid that Bob is right about headwinds coming our way. So all the more reason to do it. Then I guess I would say that I thought this council started out doing pretty darn good with our scheduling. We were finishing meetings at 10:30 and and it seemed to be that we were getting our work done. But as you can see, with the ambition, a lot of this stuff took longer than we were hoping it would. And so it all stacked up at the end. And then at the end, our meetings weren't, as efficient. We were getting out after midnight, and we were having to do more special meetings. So it's completely understandable the way it happens. It's just a question of, will we be able to do something intentional and purposeful to change that? And I think it's really hard because this community has a lot of bright, shiny objects, and there's a lot of really motivated people around a bunch of different causes. And so something comes up like the Parkland shooting, and all of a sudden we're talking about assault weapons, and that just hadn't come up before, and it ate up like a month of time to be able to do that. So it's well worth trying again, because I thought it started out well a year ago, but we ended up, partly because of things which came up, I think we ended up slowed down a little more. But I do agree on we should put the budget like near the top of the list. Enough people have named it that the new council, I expect, that will come up near the top and sort other things underneath.
I would just like to say one thing about the budget, and that's that you look at subsidies wherever they may exist throughout, because there are lots of them in there. There's lots of duplication in different areas. And so there are ways, I think there's a lot in there that can be saved and can be used as things may flatten in the future.
Great. council has a lot to do, and that's before they bring their own priorities. I would like to, if we are kind of done with that, I would like to turn everybody's attention to something I put on Hotline right before the meeting, which I also printed out for all of you, and it's the regional transportation work. And as mayor, unless you change it, and you may very well want to do that, the mayor ends up serving on several regional bodies. And so handing that off, but these bodies are doing really important work, and I just want to make sure everybody's aware of them. So when you figure out who picks up the slack, or not the slack, but who takes the baton, that everybody knows what's involved. And a couple of these, they meet monthly, some of them, and they will meet before the next council decides who serves. So just real quickly, there's US 36 Mayors and Commissioners Coalition. It is kind of our go-to, that's all of the mayors and commissioners around the Northwest region, and this is where we do the primary work of fighting for dollars at the federal level, at the state level, and working on state legislation. And this is a group that got us the US 36 managed lands. So they do meet monthly. I'm going to one more meeting on the 7th, and if anybody wants to come with me, just to get a sense, that would be great. But then I've listed them here, the next meeting's coming up. This group also meets quarterly with RTD, and there's a lot of business with RTD. They're cutting service because they can't get labor. It's sort of an ongoing struggle with them, but maintaining really strong relationships and communications is key. So I guess I hope somebody can step into that before you make assignments. There's also two road-specific coalitions. One of them's Highway 7 Coalition, and the other one's Highway 119. Those are two other major arterial priorities. We are working very closely. So on Highway 7, that goes all the way to Brighton. That involves multiple counties. And the work there is to get that arterial recognized at the state level and then to get funding for it. And so that only meets quarterly. So that one's not going to meet again until the end of January. But the other big one, the 119, is the ripest and the kind of the next priority. And that's a smaller coalition, and it's mostly Boulder, Longmont, and Boulder County. And that one's meeting monthly, and the next one's on the 25th. That project is been studied, it's ready to be implemented, and it can be implemented in segments. So right now we're talking with the CDOT about getting some of the money that used to be on the books from them as seed money to leverage additional funding. So put an asterisk next to that one, and it may be that Aaron, since you have been busy fighting for that money at Dr. Cog, that maybe, not to suggest, but maybe you want to step right into that one.
If I'm on the next council, I'm definitely interested in the 119 coalition.
Okay.
Pending whatever colleagues are on there.
And then the last thing I'll just mention is the Metro Mayor's Caucus. Obviously, only the mayor gets to go to that. It is the 40 mayors in the whole metro region. Transportation is a key issue that's discussed there regularly, as is housing and homelessness. That one is less focused on our issues, but it's kind of our way of interacting with the larger metro region out there. And they're important relationships. So whoever ends up being mayor, if we want to have a larger influence, this is one of the ways to do that. And I ended up serving on the XCOM. That's another way to do that too, if whoever serves next. So I'm just going to highlight this. I think one of the reasons we punch above our weight is because we are out there with relationships, making stuff happen. We have a delegation that's leading the state legislature. We have a governor that comes from Boulder. This is a really good time for us to help move climate action forward, multimodal transportation forward, all those things. But a lot of it happens based on relationships that span a number of years. So I guess if you guys want to break some of this work up, I think that's great. But there's a lot of strategy that happens in between meetings with staff and with the county and with the other municipalities that are our allies. So anyhow, just, it's a whole body of work, and over the arc of a council or a couple councils, a lot can be done if we maintain those relationships. So that's my spiel. I would urge, I don't know if, I think people should sign up to take some of these meetings on before the next council, and maybe you guys can do that November 19th when you all re-up, but I wouldn't just let these fall through the cracks. And you probably heard that Kathleen Brackey is leaving the city to go to the county. The good news there is we're not losing her, because but anyhow, all the more reason for council to step up and help, because, there's some turnover. Yes.
Yeah, well, Zin, like I said at the very beginning of the meeting, thank you for all of your service on these things. And you've done a phenomenal job, and we owe you a lot of gratitude. It's a lot of time. You've also done a great job on it. So thanks for highlighting this. I mean, obviously we have to see what happens in the election, who's around, but I think you can rest assured that whoever's around will make sure that these get filled and dealt with in consultation with our expert here. And are you available for an extra meeting or two if necessary?
Sure, I'll do it, yeah. Although, I'm gonna go skiing a lot. I also want to say that all this pairs really well with all the work, did I already say this? That you're doing at Dr. Cog, and that's been key. That's where we get our regional funding. So, back at you. Okay, anything else? We have one more item, I guess.
A brief update on BI Inc.
So I'm going to start out with this. At the Council Agenda Committee yesterday, the CAC requested that Carl Castillo and I follow up with the owner of BI Inc. And Carl and I had about an hour-long conversation with him today to clarify issues with the ISAP program. So the ISAP program is the program that BI runs under contract with the Department of Homeland Security. And this is a program that began probably officially in 2004, but the ideas for it began in the late 90s, when it was learned in the late 90s that people that were in the community and were supposed to show up for court were doing it at a rate of only 11%, and they wanted to improve that percentage. And so over time, programs developed that have people that are not detained in a correctional facility but allowed to be in the community are monitored through GPS. And the show-up rate for court and for complying with court orders improved from 11% to like 90%. So a very effective program. The Department of Homeland Security is the authorizing group, I guess I'll say, for this program, and they direct what it will look like, including the kind of training that they want the people that do the on-the-ground hands-on work to have. BI is the sole contractor currently for the ISAP program. There are 54 facilities throughout the United States where persons receive the GPS monitoring. All of the employees who deliver that service are trained at BI here in Boulder. They go through a 2-week training program. They are qualified in that 96% of them are bilingual. They all have a bachelor's degree. Many of them have a master's degree. Many of them, in fact, most of them, have 2 years of experience as case managers in probationary type programs. They come to BI for 2 weeks of training on the equipment and on the procedures and on humane treatment of people. Then they are supervised out in the field by project managers out in the field. And there's a whole kind of system, because it's an organization, of supervisors and reviews and things like that that occur. The way that it was described to me by Mr. Waldo and the training supervisor that we also talked with today makes it sound like they've done everything they can to make the program as humane as possible, as well-trained as possible, as good as possible under the guidance of the Department of Homeland Security. So, taking a look at the 12 issues that our community activists raised with BI in August, there are several of them that are not within the control of BI. And so those are in the control of ICE or other management. Some of them are issues like these: ankle monitors that are too tight, beeping ankle monitors, low battery alerts, ISAP officers who are bullies, ISAP officers who treat transgender people inappropriately, and the grievance process does not protect people from retaliation. In my conversations with Mr. Waldo, what he said is that while there are always going to be circumstances in which an ankle monitor is too tight or it's beeping, the person that is subject to that can always go in and talk to their case manager and have things fixed, and that those people are well trained to do that. The complaints about ISAP officers who are bullies, he believes, are one-offs, and that they're very well trained to be great case managers. In fact, there's a program in which therapeutic wraparound services are being provided to some members of the community that are being monitored. The transgender situation, they have added LGBTQ training to their training manual, and they got approval from the Department of Homeland Security to do that. And in order to change anything in their training program, they have to get approval of the Department of Homeland Security. So my sense of it is that they are trying very hard, and that there are always, because people are involved, there are always situations in which some people do not act well, and they seem to me to say that they are supervising that and trying to stop that. At the end of the conversation, I asked Mr. Waldo if he would nevertheless agree to meet with 2 members of our community, 2 members of council and their folks. And he said that he needs to ask his next level of management if that is acceptable, because so far he has been told that that should not occur. So that's what I know.
Cindy.
So I thought part of the concern of the community activists here was the affiliation with GEO and the involvement with that. Is that
yes. So GEO is essentially, I think, the owner of BI. So they are part of the upper level GEO. BI, our Boulder corporation, from my understanding, has no influence over its owner, GEO. It can't make GEO do anything. And the thing that Mr. Waldo says, and I think it's true, is that the Department of Homeland Security has rules that must be followed. And while we all may disagree with those rules and with the policies, that these corporations are not in a position to change those policies. Our representatives at the federal level are the ones that we would need to appeal to change the policies of the Department of Homeland Security.
So I saw last Thursday night a show on PBS. I think it's John Ferrugia, who's one of the station managers, who reported on the detention center in Denver. And I have to say, it was pretty horrific. It was really horrific, and anything that the city council can do in terms of talking to our federal persons, I would think would be helpful to try and put a stop to, or at least improve the situations of the people who are detained and the manner in which they are detained. And I would recommend everyone take a look at that. It's not fun, not pretty, but it's certainly informative.
I have Aaron and then Sam.
Yeah, thank you for that, Cindy. So, Jane, I appreciate you taking the time and talking to Mr. Waldo, is it? So it's good to get some additional information. I do think we should continue to press for the meeting, because I know that it sounds like they're working to address some of these issues, but I know that the citizen activists have some real specific items in there, and perhaps with some kind of facilitation, some council members, we could help get the specifics of those messages across. And maybe there's some additional things that they could do in terms of their practices. So I'd like for us to continue to encourage that to happen.
Sam?
Pretty much the same. I read the note we got back from the attorney, and as well the stuff that we've heard from activists, and it seems to me like there's room for exchange in here. I've been reading quite a bit about the detention facilities as well, and I don't know exactly how ISAP relates to the bigger picture of detention facilities, but they're pretty unpleasant. And so
Can I just
it's worth the conversation to continue. If they choose not to, I mean, Tom, I had a question for you. Are we allowed to do a resolution? It's non-binding, right? So if we did a resolution, all we'd be doing is making a statement of the sense of council.
Yep.
And so there seemed to be some pretty stiff resistance by the attorney for BI that we couldn't do that it was governmentally inappropriate.
Yeah, he's wrong.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. So it does seem like if we can't make any more progress, we can do kind of the last thing that we're allowed to do, which is to put out a resolution expressing the will of council.
So one thing I do want to clarify is that my understanding is that BI is not related to the detention facilities. The program that they operate, this ISAP program, is for persons who are not detained, persons who are in the community, and they're provided with ankle monitors, or they also have a smartphone app that in lieu of that, so that they will get messages to show up at court and stuff like that. So what happens at the detention facility, I think, is distinct from this particular program run by the Boulder company.
Okay. Well, I said there was Bob and then Mary.
Jane, did Mr. Waldo say when he would get back to you on whether he had permission to have a follow-up meeting?
He said that he had contacted, I have made another request to the supervisor and will let me know as soon as he hears back.
Okay.
Mary?
So I think that if we can get that meeting, it would be helpful to better understand things like one of the things that you mentioned, Jane, was that when one of the issues that were brought up by the community was that there's beeping or the ankle monitors are too tight, and you said they're always welcome to go to their case managers. And it seems to me that if that happens in the evening, you probably couldn't get there until the next day. So that's pretty harsh. So I don't know if it would be within their, that would be a question to ask. Is it in your purview to change that policy, to be able to get attention to that situation immediately so that somebody doesn't have to go through the night with that? So those are things that may be within their capacity to change. So it would be worthwhile to sit down with them and just have a conversation and ask more questions and just be both helpful about it.
Right. So I know that Mr. Waldo would gladly meet with any of you, and I think you could get your questions answered there. I mean, Carla and I tried to ask every question that we could think of, and yeah, we didn't think of that one. We were asking questions more about the training manual and stuff. So I don't know if you want to do that or not, but I would suggest that rather than me being a go-between and not thinking of every question you would want to ask.
No, that's right. And I think that the ultimate situation would be to have council members and community members there and all
Absolutely,
sit
yeah.
there. So I think that would be the best case. And we'll hold out for that.
Okay.
At least I would like to hold out for that and see if we can get there. If not, then we take our next steps.
Does this council want to, we just want to wait in here? Do we want to set A, then B kind of things in place?
Make a suggestion. The next council meeting is the 19th of November. I would think that would be an adequate amount of time for Mr. Wall to get back to Jane about the meeting. So I might suggest that CAC put this on as a discussion point again on the 19th of November, and we'll either have a yes or a no, and I guess I would interpret silence as a no.
So just so I'm understanding, that the last act of this council on the 19th, or the first act of the new council?
First act of the new council. First act of the new council. And it wouldn't necessarily be a resolution. It would just be getting, Jane will obviously let us know as soon as she hears, and there may be some activity before then. But if there hasn't been any activity before then, I think maybe the new council can take that up and say, geez, we haven't heard back, or we heard back a disappointing answer. And to Mary's point, let's hold out first for a meeting with community members and council members, and if that is not forthcoming, 3 weeks seems to me more than enough time, then the next council, as one of its first acts, can talk about what the next steps are.
Well, and if they do say yes, the first act could be to nominate 2 members.
Nominate 2 members and get going. Yep.
What? Oh. Well, I was going to say, if we hear back before then, we could go ahead and nominate 2 people. No.
Well, I was just going to ask that we would go ahead, though, and make some move with our legislative person to move towards some kind of, even though it's in another city, the detention center, that we try to move forward with registering our, I can't even think of the word.
Well, can I just, while you're thinking, because we actually have a meeting of the Legislative Committee tomorrow, so we can make sure that this is high up on our legislative agenda.
That would be great.
Our federal representative.
Well, and I also think that this is something that we could involve our congressional delegation in.
Yep.
And I'm imagining they might be amenable to champagne.
Well, can we get that on our that breakfast, just get it on the agenda in December?
Yes, we can, though the legislative breakfast, I think is only our state legislators as opposed to our federal legislators.
But maybe somebody.
Everywhere,
I was going to say, next time we see Joe Neguse, let us make a point of asking him. Okay, and we'll talk about it tomorrow at the legislative agenda. We want to just leave it be as is, and CAC will see if anything happens, and try to tee it up for the next council then? Does that feel, do we want to leave it there?
Did we want to put two people's names forward so that if Mr. Waldo does come forward, that we're already there and we've set up our subcommittee?
I think only if 2 of Mirabai, Sam, and Mary are willing, because I think you're the only ones that we know for sure around for long enough.
Works for me.
Well, I was going to, yeah, I think any 2 of the 3 of you would be great.
Yeah, you would.
Okay.
I'm happy to do it.
Okay, so
Mary's
let's
happy?
just wait till we hear back, Mary, and then Mirabai and I can, one of us, come along with you.
Does that work?
That's right.
Okay. Let's leave that there. We have reached the end of our meeting.
The end of our council.
The end of our council.
I'm going to call it a wrap.
Going to call it a wrap.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure, that's Lisa's.
That we didn't, well, I'm taking over. After all, we're kind of interchangeable to a lot of people's eyes. But I just want to thank Cindy and Suzanne and Lisa for their service and how much I enjoyed working with you all in this council. And good luck and best wishes to you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Enjoy those Tuesday nights off.
We'll be waving it.
You're right. Yeah, and a special thank you to Suzanne for being our mayor for the last 4 years and herding this group of cats on a weekly basis. It's a tough task. You've done it very well.
They're very cool cats. All right. Oh, Mirabai.
And I'll just say, as this being my first council, and the way that everyone spoke about this kind of being their favorite council, I'm a little scared moving forward. Having seen previous councils as well, just from a citizen standpoint, I think I was very spoiled, and so I do hope the new council can take this council's lead and have the respect and courtesy, even if we disagree, that we can work together, because it's been an honor to work with all of you, and thank you for your service, and thanks for helping guide Boulder, and thanks for helping mentor the newbies.
Yes, just thank you again, Lisa. Thank you again, Cindy. Thank you again, Suzanne.
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 You're in trouble.
Mayor.
That's right. And Joe.
So as soon as you bang that gavel.
I'm done. I'm
Done running meetings.
2, 1.
All right.
We're adjourned.
Live from Paris, on France 24.